All right. Hello, everyone. We should be live here on my channel. Without further ado, hello, Anjin in the chat, familiar face. I have the absolute pleasure to introduce to my left, Mopai, who is taking the time out of his week off, actually, to come and join me here. So first of all, thank you for joining me, Mr. Pi. How you doing?
My pleasure, my pleasure. To be honest, I've been spending the whole day sanding down doors, so I'm actually quite happy to be interrupted.
Stolen from his manual labor to come and
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
his I guess in his life, but also like his journey and everything else. So, if those of you aren't aware of how this works, I tried this last month as a little trial with Mod Shogun, and essentially I wanted it to be inspirational in a sense, but also to give you a bit of background into a mod, Jagex, who works on Runescape, what they do, and just the fun that came with it, as well as stories they may have to share. And in the case of Mopai, he actually, how long have you been at Jagex, sir?
8.5 years now.
8.5 years worth of stuff to talk about. So we'll stream for as long as we need to. I do want to do one note. I'm expecting my shopping delivery to arrive at some point during the stream, so there will be a time where I will have to duck out and I will let Pi talk to you guys in the chat until I put the shopping away, which shouldn't take too long, and then we will carry it on. So without further ado, let's jump into this. So, first of all, on a first name basis, are you okay with introducing yourself from a name perspective?
Yeah, you can call me John, don't
Yeah,
worry. I think
that's fine.
everyone knows it now anyway. So I'm just retweeting your thing so that I
Oh,
can
thank you,
point
sir.
people here. So if it sounds like I'm distracted, I'm just typing.
So yeah, John, or known as Mobpie to obviously most of you in RuneScape. So I mean, we kind of have to go back before you joined Jagex. So I mean, first of all, when it came down to it, when you go into education and so on, was the goal always games development for you?
No, actually, no. This
What?
is interesting, actually.
What?
So I always love games. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love games. Um, but I actually wanted to go into the field of AI, believe it or not.
Huh.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So I think it was year four. So how old is that?
Year four is
It's quite young. It's like 10, 11,
11's year six. I'd say yeah, 10. 10.
10. So my dad was a massive Trekkie. And then I was watching TNG Next Generation, and I saw Data, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna make that. So at the age of 10, I was like, I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I'm gonna become a programmer, and I'm gonna make a robot, and he's gonna be awesome. Um, and like that was very much the plan. So I did my A levels and got into Imperial College London, which is pretty good uni. Doing computer science and AI, and then it became very apparent that I was not going to be able to do a PhD because my English is terrible. Um, so I was doing like all of the exams, and like I'd understand the subject matter, and like I'll never forget it. Like my machine learning course, I had a bunch of people on my course that didn't understand the thing just before the exam, and then I tutored them all on. It's like, okay, this is how it all works, and they all explained it. And then we got the exam results back, and they all get A's, and I'm like, yeah, awesome. I taught these guys, I'll be alright. And I got mine back, and it was like an E. And I'm like, what's going on here? So I like asked for the paper back, and like literally the examiner couldn't read my handwriting.
Oh
The grammar
man.
was everywhere, and like I spoke to my tutor, it's like that. This is what I want to do. I want to go into the field of artificial intelligence and robotics, and I want to do this. And like my tutor was just like, then you need like, unless you can drastically improve your English, you should probably look at this again, because you could be the smartest person in the world, and you can understand these things, but if you can't tell anyone the research you've done, then you're never going to get a PhD,
Wow.
which is pretty brutal. Um, so like, but I had become a programmer, and I always loved games. And so I kind of looked at, okay, where else can I create AI? Where else can I create like this thing that interfaces with humans that creates like really really cool stuff. So I was like, games. I'm just so like, and I thought I was pretty good at games at the time. I think I spoke to you this about before. Like I coached the England squad for Unreal Tournament when I was in uni.
I love that.
Um,
I think that's badass to be honest with you. Like as someone like
so like I
you were
was
a part of esports because before it really blew up. You was like that integrated,
yeah
like kind of circularized version of it, and I think that's amazing.
yeah, it was a very tight knit community. And like I was doing really really well in esports. Um, However, I got to a point in esports where I realized that I wasn't going to get any further, which is where I became a coach. I was player coach in the England squad at the time, but actually, what I was doing was like I'd stay back because my mechanical skill was nowhere near the level it needed to be at that point. But I was able to, whilst playing, kind of effectively like play chess at the speed of Unreal Tournament and Quake and tell everyone else where they needed to be and coordinate the team. So that's how I got into the team. But like I'd reached a point where kind of like, okay, like my like game knowledge is up here and my mechanical knowledge is down here, and I'm slowly getting this up, but it's nowhere good. And then I start playing people that are like up here, and I'm just like, oh. So like I could have a really good mechanical person, and I'd outthink them, and like I'd be pointing my gun at them before they could look at me. So that didn't matter that I was slower than them, but then I got to a point where I'm like, oh. And like at the top end of esports, talent is a thing. Yeah, like you have this kind of reality slap you in the face. That talent really really is a thing, and there's this whole 10,000 hours thing, and I did my 10,000 hours, and I got where I needed to be. But then, the talented people also did 10,000 hours. You're like, oh no. So I got to the point where like it just wasn't a viable thing. I managed. It's quite cool. I managed to pay for quite a lot of beer in uni by selling the peripherals that I won from LAN parties and stuff. Um, but yeah, yeah, that was fun. And I eventually started working on an esports website as well.
Nice.
Doing so, I was running ladders and helping with a little bit of scripting on a website called Fragged Nation.
Oh, Frag Nation! My
Yeah, yeah,
God!
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. Really, really.
Jesus.
Yeah, this is way back in the day.
Yeah.
And like that was a lot of fun, and that's how I knew how to write an ELO system. So like if you go forward to like when I created deathmatch and the matchmaking system and the ELO system that allows you to play as much as you want, but kind of you can kind of farm it, but has these anti-farm mechanics in it. Like that's how I knew how to make those systems, is because I kind of worked on it previously.
So you go from there. I mean, so you obviously mentioned you go into development. So is Jagex your first job, as it were, or did you have jobs before
No,
that? Okay.
no, no. So again, man, it's gonna sound like I came from the school of hard knocks. This is ridiculous, but so I wanted to go into games, and I applied to a lot of places in games. And I got quite a few interviews, but it's that old kind of like, you're fresh out of uni, you don't have the experience we want you to have. And like I had quite a few, like I had a recruiter phone me up after an interview once. So believe it or not, sorry, that's disgusting. Um, Sorry, chat.
I don't care. It's
um,
fine.
can I get some smokes in the chat for that disgusting? So believe it or not, I was actually interviewing for Ocado of all things. Um,
Ocado.
yeah, so it's a piece of
Wow.
software that so they kind of get a route for like delivering all of the shopping, and then this kind of uses routing algorithms to kind of work out the most efficient route to drop off everyone's shopping. Um, and when I applied there, they got me to like write down on paper the code for a linked list, like blank piece of paper, write down on paper the code for a linked list. Um, and funnily enough, there were like a couple of null pointer exceptions I didn't catch because I wrote it down on paper, but they
Who
were
would have
looking
thought?
for a candidate that could do that, which is fine. That's what the candidate they wanted. But afterwards, they phoned the recruiter, and the recruiter phoned me and said, "Look, unless you can code in assembler, you can't go, you'll never be able to get into games." And I'm like, I can code in assembler, but they're like, yeah, but you need to be an assembly god to get into games. I'm like, this is rubbish. So actually, my first job was in telecoms. believe it or
Wow.
not. So yeah, it is ridiculous.
I mean, just to
So
take a step back really quickly, just so people are aware, Ocado is because obviously it's not everywhere. Is
yeah,
online supermarket, right? Just to clarify.
it's the online supermarket for Waitrose, I
Yeah.
believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just so people, just in case people wonder what is Ocado, so just to clear it out the way. So you
yeah,
went
yeah,
into
that's fine.
telecom.
Telecoms. So I worked for a company that did two things. So one of the things they created was when you get a text message and it's like we're gonna send you. I'm reading the chat as well. Yeah, I am. Like when they send you like, oh, we're gonna send you a survey, and you send out numbers 1 to 5 and how good things are. They created like the automated system there, and they did some what's known as natural language processing stuff to kind of interpret a lot of the responses that are in human speak and kind of convert that into what the computer will understand. So I worked on some of that, and I worked on what's known as protocol converters between like the old like stuff made in the 1980s systems, and to convert those protocols into VoIP, basically. So the telecoms companies, they don't like spending money, but
Oh, would have thought that.
they've got all of these boxes, these pieces of hardware that were made in like the 70s and 80s, and I'm like talking like the chips in these things are like that big, they're huge, and they just don't want to replace them. So what we provided was basically a box that sat between the old and the new system, so that they didn't have to replace their dog old stuff, and it basically converted them between them, and it was much cheaper than completely replacing everything. So, but yeah, I kind of worked on that sort of stuff. And like I was applying to Jagex during that time, but I totally didn't expect to get in Jagex. Like I expected my first job in the games industry to be like this indie that's about to go bust any moment, or like um, a software warehouse that EA kind of takes like says make our game for us and we'll take all the credit but you'll get some money, so shut up. Like totally expected that, and I was applying to Jagex for like 2 years before I eventually got the interview at
What
Jagex.
was the original role you applied for?
So it was content developer.
Okay.
I applied for, yeah, which is a bit weird in Jagex because an awful lot of people started in player support. You go around Jagex and everyone's like, so I started in player support, and I'm like, I feel like I've jumped a few rungs in the ladder here. You know what I mean? Um,
Let's just take a step back really quickly. I'm sure they won't
yeah,
mind me saying, like, people who started in player support, I can name three right now that come to mind. Who, correct me if I'm wrong, came from player support and in some way have progressed in Jagex. The ones that come to mind for me are, I may be wrong, I hope. Well, not I hope, but I think Mod Days started in player support. Is that sorry? Oh, I think your camera just cut off there. Sorry, Mod Days was in player support, correct?
mine.
Yeah, yeah. Mod Days, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Days was in player support.
Mod Raven.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, yeah.
And then another one that stands out to me because I worked with them as well was Mod Mahi, and these are three people who started in player support and literally progressed into different
You've
variations in
you've
the.
you missed out. You've missed out one big one there.
Hmm.
God Ash started in
Yeah,
player
Mod
support.
Ash, you're right. Yeah, absolutely correct. I mean,
Yeah.
yes. So, I mean, did it like you going straight to content dev? You didn't know this at the time. Obviously, that people kind of
No.
went from player support. You just went there. So
Kind of go player support, then QA, and then you go in content dev, right? No, I just went straight for content dev, and it was quite interesting because my CV and everything didn't mention that I was a RuneScape player for years. When
wow.
I applied to Jagex, it didn't mention RuneScape at all because I kind of I wanted to get in on my own merit, and I also kind of had this. This is completely wrong, by the way. Like, I had this kind of thought that, oh, if I'm a long-term RuneScape player, then they won't want me. They won't want like an obsessed player making their game. It's completely wrong, by the way. If you play RuneScape and apply to Jagex, please say that you're on there. And the EP at the time asked me just casually, it's like, "Oh, have you ever played RuneScape before?" And I'm like, and this was what 2014 at the time, so I was like, "Yeah, I've played it for like 11 years." It's just like, and you didn't put this on your CV and cover letter. I'm like, no, it's like, what? But yeah, I got the interview purely off of
Off your own
my
back, which
CV
is
and cover
good. I mean,
CV and cover letter.
I
Yeah.
think that's a validation for you in that sense. I mean, just before we jump into your interview, take a step back. You obviously mentioned you've been playing RuneScape for a long time. I don't think people are aware that you've played RuneScape for that long. So are there
Yeah,
any?
I kind of tout it about a little bit. Like I've played it since Classic.
Oh no, I know you've touted it
Yeah.
about internally.
Mm.
I know that for a fact. But I mean, if we talk about what you did in your time before joining Jagex in RuneScape, what did you do? If there's anything that stands out.
Oh God, I did a lot. I played a hell of a lot of RuneScape. So I used to run back when it was MIRC and TeamSpeak. So I used to run a TeamSpeak back then. I think it was only like four TeamSpeaks for RuneScape back then.
Hmm.
One of them was Zezima's TeamSpeak. Yeah, he was on TeamSpeak an awful lot. This is TeamSpeak 2.
Oh, TS2, goodness.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so I ran one of the big TeamSpeaks then, and I used to write bots for TeamSpeak and MRC as well. I used to write bots for that. Obviously, everyone used RuneScript back then. No one used my bot except for my little clans. Um, I ran several PvP clans, a Castle Wars clan. I helped run a skilling clan for a bit. I was the web scripter for that. I helped run. So I don't. These are quite old school names. I helped run the community for. If do you remember Max Boyson?
Way before
It's
my
quite an
time.
old
So,
name. Yeah, yeah.
so some
I
backstory
start. I,
on my RS knowledge. So on the absolute like looking in on it in like the early 2010s, late noughties, I only really started playing it properly when I became CM for RuneScape because that like I had a stream where I was thrown onto a stream with Mod Mahi and Invention just came out and I didn't know what I was doing and it looked like when I look back on it it's quite embarrassing because like I'm someone who should know the game and that stream really highlighted to me that I need to essentially pick up my shit and like start learning this game properly so I can try and be better for people who play it. So you're gonna throw names at me. I'm not really gonna know them to be honest with you, but I want to see if
that's.
people in
I
the
think
chat
some
know.
people in there do. Like so, Max Boyson was part of one of the very early wave of YouTube RuneScape YouTubers. So Max Boyson. Is it Vodka 5? I believe. Shy Steph. These are names that you'll know if you've like followed it for years. Like those kinds of people. They had like a fan site, and I helped out on there for a little bit. Um, what else did I do? Oh, yeah. So I wrote a program which a computer program which I don't use now. And I didn't again. This is another thing I probably should have told Jagex I did. And I didn't because I thought they were going to ban me. But I basically wrote a computer program to harvest all of the Grand Exchange data off of the website and then throw that into matching algorithms so that I could find out what all of the merch clans were picking up
Oh
as they
my
were picking them up.
god.
And then I could counter merch the merch clans. And I got a red party hat doing that. So, and then I stopped because I thought they were going to ban me because I was making too much money too quickly.
I'll be honest with you, I don't see the problem
Um,
with that personally, but
so
fair.
if you kind of need to know how the merch clans at the time worked. So the way they worked was the merch clans used to say what you buy and what you sell, but about 1 or 2 days beforehand, all of the officers in the chat would buy out these things and then tell everyone else to buy them, and then they'd basically sell the things that they just bought to the merch clan. And then a few days later, they'd say everyone dump them. And like the people in there made a little bit of money, but the officers made a ton of money. And I realized this is what they were doing. So I wrote a program to automate working out what items the merch clans people would pick up.
Like to me, you're using
Um,
API and data that's visible, so I feel
oh
like
yeah, it was perfectly fine. It's just it's like though as an RS player you're constantly going, can I get banned for this? Can I get banned for this? Um, and yeah, like I did an awful lot of fun things in RuneScape. I think I loved running clans the most. I think just working with people. Can you believe it? I used to be a skiller.
that's weird. Like yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
weird
I
to
used
me.
to, I used to really enjoy the skilling wars that we used to have. So we'd have like like who can get the most amount of XP in a weekend on this thing, and you do really really unhealthy things that you only do on bonus XP weekend nowadays. Uh, and I really really enjoyed that, but yeah, I distanced myself from that. And hello.
Oh, you right?
Yeah, my all my screens have gone blank, but you seem okay. Oh, I see. So what's happened is because I haven't done anything with my
It's
computer,
turned
it's
off.
it's locked itself. Yeah, don't worry, it's fine. I've worked it
It's
out.
it's gone it's gone to sleep because you haven't actually done anything on there for the time we've been
I
talking.
feel I feel like I should have. I feel like I should be playing Runescape. So like I debated on whether or not I should AFK Krill because I'm trying to get Krill
Oh,
pet at the moment, but.
I mean, you can't really show it on the camera because it's off the camera. But I mean, you actually,
No, just
yeah, you
I
picked up
probably
something
could
really.
do.
I mean, it's fine.
Right, there we go. It's fine. It's fine. We're back. Where was I? So yeah, I ran lots of different types of clans, and I enjoyed that. Like mostly people got me to make the websites and the little forum things like the rotators and stuff. But like my favorite, I think my favorite thing in RuneScape is the people, um, and the people that play it, and like creating the little communities and helping foster them and watch them grow was just yeah, was lovely. And the fact that I've done it for PvP and skilling is a bit weird. I've never run a PvE guild, guild like chat clan. Funny enough, but yeah, like PvP and skilling was a lot of fun. They were both very different breeds. The PvP community is quite aggressive.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
there's a lot of
we'll get into that
there's a
later.
lot of like that no it's like even back then
Oh,
with
okay.
like DI there was a lot of smack talk and like people would victimize you, and then the skilling clans are the complete opposite. They're like your stay-at-home mums, like trying to like help all of these help all these like kids who come home from school like know what to do, and like yeah it was a very wholesome environment, and compared to the PvP environment was just hilarious seeing the juxtaposition. But yeah, like I did an awful lot in RS. Like yeah, like I made a lot of money with a program. I ran some clans. Um, but I was that guy, like that we all were at that age. I'd come home from school or uni or college, and I'd play RuneScape until like 2, 3 in the morning, chatting absolute garbage on TeamSpeak, um, for hours, and then I'd wake up the next morning and go back to school, college, etc. And like weekends were just playing RuneScape. My friends were like my friends non-RuneScape friends at the time were like just you're hell to get out, like they wanted me to go out clubbing and stuff. I was like, I just got the time for that, it's just like stand in a room filled with sweaty people that are just trying to be someone that they're not, or I can just have a laugh on TeamSpeak and go and mass corp, and that's way better evening in my opinion.
So, so, okay. So we got to your interview. Is there anything you want to say regarding your interview with content developer, or is it just
um well, yeah, because I thought content developer was a script monkey, a code monkey.
okay?
So I turned up and they showed me RuneScript. And I learned RuneScript incredibly fast. I actually, in my interview, I invented something that is used today to save variable space, but I did it. I'd only learned the language in an hour, and I'd already like gone, oh, you can do this
Wow.
cool thing. Um, so my technical side was they were very happy with that, but then all of a sudden they tried to make me design a game, and I was like, wait, what? And they're like, oh yeah, you've got like a design a RuneScape update now, and I was like, okay. So I think I had to design an agility mini game with penguins in it. Yeah. And I with flex, but okay. Hey, if you're good at something, be happy about it. Tell people you're good at something. You deserve it. So that's everyone in the chat. That's your job for tomorrow, is to tell someone something you're good at. It will make you feel good. Um,
He's got a point.
so like I think I had it was basically a weird. Actually, no, it was like you know the dungeoneering thing with the shadow wall where you jump on the pedestals
Yes.
and the shadow wall chases you. It was like it was like that, but you had like two people facing each other, and you kind of had to be the one that knocked the other person off. But it rolled your kind of agility stat to kind of work out whether or not you go over or you could fall down. But there was also a like this troll on the side. The troll had Brian Blesser's voice for a reason. Don't ask me why. The troll at the side, like throwing rocks on different pedestals. So like you'd plan a route, but then all of a sudden the troll would be throwing a rock next turn at that pedestal, which would completely screw up your whole turn. So then you've got to kind of come around to try and trick the other guy. Um, yeah. So I designed that. They liked that. And then they were like, okay, so we kind of get your design. So they tried to get me to design an Xbox game because they were like, well, this is the complete opposite of what you're doing. Um,
Wow.
and I made an absolute garbage, garbage thing for it. And I remember turning to Mod Tim who did my design interview. Like I'd created this thing. I can't remember what it was. It was like a play on growing. It was like a play on sport, except for you were a kid that kind of grew up. But it was awful. And I remember saying to Mod, is it Mod Tim? At the time, I was just like, this is awful. Don't just ignore it. And I think he kind of I think the fact that I realized what I created was a pile of garbage gave me some kudos there. Um, but yeah, like the interview was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed it. And I totally didn't expect to have a phone call back.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, I remember I was seconded to the QA team at the telecoms company at the time. I remember getting the phone call from a guy named Francesco. And like, there's a few people that have had this surreal experience. Francesco is a Sicilian guy, and he's actually gone on to make some really awesome restaurants
Oh, is it him?
in things. Yeah, Romy. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
Romy. Oh my
In
God.
Cambridge.
Wow.
But this guy has a really thick Sicilian accent. And when a guy who sounds like Mario phones you up and tells you you've got a got job in the games industry, you don't really. You're like, all right, all right. Who is this? Dave. Dave. Like, this isn't funny. You know. But I'm not going to do the accent because I don't want to
Please
upset
don't.
Francesco. I can't do it. But like it was it was like but I remember closing the door and like turning to my colleague at the time and going, I've got a job in the games industry on the game that I used to play for hours on end. Like I've literally just got my dream job. Like, but I had to like we were in like this little office. It was just me and him. I had to close the door so that I could be excited for 5 minutes that I'd just got into the games industry because I've been trying for like 2 3 years. Like, and I used to like getting into the games industry is like just poking your head up is really difficult. Like,
Mm,
I remember one time turning up to develop at Brighton without a ticket or anything and going up to, so have you been to develop?
yes.
Yeah, so at develop they've got those big coffee stands so that people between the talks can get there. I literally turned up every day with a stack of my CVs and put it on those coffee stands so that all of the
Bless
people going
you.
by. I remember actually like seeing someone with the Epic badge on them, and I played a lot of Unreal Tournament. I remember having a little fanboy moment there, and I remember seeing Jagex as well. I think I saw Andrew Gower
Oh, wow. Okay.
as a little like girly scream internally. Like you kind of meet the people that are your idols back then, and you're like, oh my god, it's Andrew Gower. He's just no, I can't. I can't like. I should thinking about it. I should have just gone up to him and just gone. This is my CV. I played your game for years. I love it. Can I have a job? And that might have worked actually. Knowing how some people got their job, that might have actually worked because Andrew's got an awful lot of time for people who are very passionate about RuneScape. It probably would have been in player support, um, but still, yeah,
Everyone's got to start
like
somewhere, though, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. But like, yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's fascinating, genuinely fascinating story because I love stuff like this because like it's nice finding out along with the same time as everyone else, really, like how you get there. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
To find out how you get there.
like
Go on.
the one thing I would say to anyone who wants to work in the games industry, is like as a programmer, you need a portfolio of work. It's probably one of the only things where, as a programmer, you need to turn up with a portfolio.
Yeah.
So I'd actually, even though I wanted to be create AI, I'd actually programmed games since I was 12. I'd actually been a games programmer since I was 12. So my family didn't have any money, like literally no money. So we couldn't afford a computer. We couldn't afford. So everyone was playing consoles at that time, and I'm talking like Sega Mega Drive and
Mm.
SNES. And I'd go around my friend's house and play them. But we didn't have any money. But I wanted to play games. So what we found was this ZX Spectrum in this charity shop. So while everyone else was playing like the SNES and the Mega Drive and like the PSX and N64 after that, I was like sat like with this thing from the 1970s coding basic to try and like make my games that I wanted to play. And I'd go and I'd go around my friend's house and I'd play Golden Axe. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome, right? So how can I make this game using basic and not 8-bit, 8 colors, 8 color palette. Um, you know, like this is for portfolio. Coming out of Sorry, I've just so someone's
Yeah,
just
that's
asked.
I've seen it.
Portfolio, is it of professional work or personal projects? So coming out of university, personal projects are so much more worthwhile than your professional work. Don't get me wrong, you should still do stuff in your professional work and in your degree. But say I'm hiring a games developer and I've got this one guy who's done games during his course. In fact, to kind of reiterate on that, whenever someone asks me, okay, what degree should I do to get in the games industry? I don't say any of these game design courses. I don't say any of these games development courses. I say, do a computer science degree and make games in your spare time. Because I've got a guy who just kind of, you got these two guys. You got one guy who did a course that's very tailored towards games, and everything on his portfolio is everything he did in his degree. And then I've got this other guy who has a really, really solid foundation of programming and has spent all of his time learning how computers work and how to do them. But also, he's got taken time out of his day. I'm saying he shouldn't in this day and age, but um, they have taken time, their time out of their personal time to create games. Like this guy is passionate about games. They love games, and they have a stronger technical foundation than this guy who's just focused on games. So like do a computer science degree and make games in your spare time because you are such a stronger candidate.
Gotcha. Um,
Um, but yeah, so I'd make games from very young because like we just couldn't afford anything. And I remember finally getting to play RuneScape. And again, like one of the reasons why I played RuneScape is because it would run on a potato. You know what I mean? So like I managed to get like my friends third hand computer that I think it was like a 386 at the time, and everyone else was on like the Pentiums had come out. They were the really cool things back then, a Pentium, Pentium 1 and Pentium 2. Yeah, I'm old. um and like I'd finally got this, and like I could, like, RuneScape was one of the only things I could play. RuneScape was one of the only things I played, but also Wolfenstein 3D, so the
oh,
precursor to Doom.
oh, what a
I,
game.
I played I played that to death, which is why I kind of eventually gravitated towards Unreal Tournament. Okay, boomer, not quite that old. Cheers. Uh,
So, I just wanna. So, you just found out you got the job. At the
yeah,
time, presumably you moved to Cambridge, correct?
yeah. I completely uprooted everything and got, oh god, the first house I had in Cambridge was awful. If you like, if you've ever rented in Cambridge, basically,
Don't. Just don't.
don't. Like the tenants in Cambridge are dog worth nothing. So when they are though, like. A property for rent goes up in Cambridge and goes the same day. So like if you're at all picky or at all like if you're like at all difficult, they'll just be like, okay, I'll give it to someone else because
Mm.
they know it will go to someone else. And my first place in Cambridge had like it was riddled with damp. There was moisture. Like I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be slugs in my kitchen because
Oh
there's
my
just condensation
god.
everywhere. When I eventually moved out of there, I remember throwing away like furniture because mold had grown on it. It was just awful, awful place. Um, it got slightly better from there, but yeah, don't rent in Cambridge. It's awful.
Mm.
But yeah, I moved up to Cambridge, um, and I got a yeah,
I,
like
my experience in living in Cambridge was I lived at a hotel for 2 months, and then ended up sharing a place with at the time. Well, as people moved in, but it was Mod Ramen and other mods as the years went by. Like kind of people came in and came out. Like Mod Curse is one of them, and so on and so forth. But yeah, the prices are stupid, just stupid.
yeah. I think my I used to share with oh, so he had many names. He was called Mod Kips, and Mod Z.
Okay,
Um, so Mod Z was the person who made the NIS.
he made a new interface system. Okay.
Yeah, and Mod Kips was a balancer. So I live with those guys, and those guys are great. In fact, I'm going to Mod Kip's wedding soon, so
Oh,
yeah,
there
so
you
that
go.
went well.
All right, so you just moved to Cambridge. You have a new job. Your first step into the games industry. Here you are at Jagex. So, moving as you go to there as content developer. What is the first team, if you can remember, who you worked with, and what project did you work on, as in your first one?
So back then it wasn't teams.
Oh, okay.
So RuneScape, you'd be one person to a project, and
What?
the content developer had an awful lot of say in everything. So nowadays, just to preface this, nowadays we work in Scrum teams, and like a project is given to a team of people. But back then, no, like the bigger things, so things like dungeoneering and clans, they were given to a group of developers, but each update was kind of owned by that developer, and you had to liaise with all of the different departments, and it was very much your vision, your creation. Like you'd get given a document that would basically say like it was called a core aims document, so literally like the core aims of what they were doing. It would say like, okay, I want a mini game that gives say let's use Rogue's Den as an example that gives agility. Was it thieving and is it agility? I believe.
I think so.
Um,
Not too sure off the top
yeah,
of my head.
yeah. Agility experience, and then that'll be it. And like if you're lucky, it would say like for what levels, and then you'd basically have to um concept it. So you'd be given like a design lead at the same time. So you'd like write a whole bunch of concepts. Like you weren't allowed to just kind of run with one idea back then. You had to concept three very, very different things, at least three very, very different things, and then you sit down with a design lead. And then you kind of have a back and forth, and then eventually one of your concepts would be picked up, and then you'd make that into a design document, and then you code it, and you do all the things like, okay, like here are all of the assets that I want from the art team. Here's what I want from the audio team. Like you'd literally like you'd be the owner of your world. And that was kind of cool. Like it had a lot of things wrong with it. A
Mm.
lot of things came in quite late, because it was just dependent on one person to like really get their head down and work well. Um, and like it was using the waterfall process as well, so it wasn't very tolerant to other people. The art team was like a resource shared between everything, so rather than having your embedded artist in your team, everyone shared that. So if one person asked for tons of things, then another person didn't get a lot of things, and like
Yeah, I can see
that
the
like
problems
there
coming
wasn't a
from
lot of
that.
interplay there, sort of thing. It was, but as a content developer, I loved it because I was like, you know what, you've given me this thing, and now this is my baby, and I get to shape everything, and this is my world, and like when the game update went out, like it had your name on the at the bottom of the news post. It was just like, yeah, this is Mod Pie's update, and you felt really, really empowered.
To be
Um,
honest, I kind of wish we. I kind of. I'm saying we as if I still Jesus. I need to start. I still occasionally say we, and I clearly haven't snapped out of that yet. But I feel like they need to start putting their names at the bottom of the news post when it comes to main updates, because I think it's worth recognizing that. I kind of enjoy. I kind of like that personally. I think that's really good, and it gives more attention to
yeah,
those. And also, for example, if you're just coming back and come back to the game and you've just seen this news post, who do I know who's done this content? Like, who do I know who to go to about this content?
like we signed it by the teams now, and we also say that the RuneScape team, because I do think like people need to realize that like the whole team nowadays, the whole of the RuneScape floor contributes an awful lot to every update. Don't get me wrong, like the team that creates the content does all of that stuff that we used to do, and like the vast majority of it. But I think it's like if someone's spent like weeks giving feedback on something, but they're not on the news post, they get a bit upset. So
Yeah.
I think we eventually just changed it to the RuneScape team.
Right. I'm gonna let you answer some stuff in the chat. My shopping's arrived early, so I'll be right back. I'm gonna go get my
All
shopping.
right,
And Nupple, thank you for the sub. I'll be right back, everyone.
right, come on, guys. Let me see what's on my bed. One sec, I'll get him for you. So, oh, let me just take the headset off. Sorry. So this is Terrence, the Triceratops. All Triceratops are called Terrence, named after the very first Triceratops that I tamed on Ark. If you guys have ever played Ark, he lasted about a day before a T-Rex killed him. But ever since, Terrence is every Triceratops is called Terrence, and will remember Terrence every day. Can I get an F in the chat for Terrence, please? Because Terrence was a legend. But yeah, it's a Triceratops. I actually picked up this Triceratops for my other half when she was pregnant with my first, so that she had something to cuddle whilst I was at work. Hey, thanks, guys. What happened to miasmic spells? I think we're going to cover that later when we talk about EOC. What's my favorite game besides RS? It's going to be Unreal Tournament. I used to play it professionally. I used to make a lot of mods for it. And it's another game where I created like a tight knit community of friends. So there are two games where even to this day I have like very very close friends that I've only met them in person a few times, but like they will be coming to my wedding. You know what I mean? Like, and Unreal Tournament's another one of them. What councils am I on? I'm only on the combat council. It sounds a bit weird considering I've done the combat balancing, but the balancing council mostly does like economics and skilling, and the combat council does combat. What's my favorite starter Pokemon? Charizard. Why am I so dreamy? It's the beard, mate. It's the beard. Which year on tournament? Game of the year. Game of the year. So,
The best version,
1999
the
is that one.
999 version.
Yeah, like I find that you're either a 1999 fanboy or a 2014 fanboy. And there were no other Unreal tournaments. I won't hear any of it. To be honest, 3 was cool. I quite liked 3, but you found kind of heavy. Do I have my pad handy? Probably somewhere around here. I've always got a pad somewhere to hand. I like to write things down.
And also,
Does it ever?
go on. I've just ran outside to the back
Yeah.
gate where they're meant to be. They're not there, and I'm like, what? You made me run just to make sure you're not even here. And the problem is, we live in this specific area where it can get a little bit confusing to find us. So that's great.
Does it? Does it bother you when players break the game and do things that you didn't think was possible? No, I love it. It's stressful because I have to fix it, but one of my favorite things about games development, and this was actually in my cover letter for Jagex, so take this one, write it down, it worked. Um, was how you can create a system and it's the most beautifully crafted system and you think it works this way, and then you hand it to the you guys, and then you just totally don't do what I expected you to do. And
Speedrunners,
and
perfect
yeah, and you
example.
come up with your own metas, um, like and that is absolutely awesome. Like I've created something and then someone else has made it their own. Like that's game development gold right there. Um, and like yeah, some of them are going to be bugs. Some of them are bugs that turn into features. So I've always got the I always tell people about the the court beast's dark core. Um, and you know how poisoning dark core back in the day, um, poisoning the dark core would slow down the poison, the tick of the dark core.
So
That's actually a bug.
sorry, I have to rin them. This is what it's coming down to now. So you're gonna hear me. I'm gonna be at my microphone, but you're gonna hear me trying to
That's
rin
all
them
right.
to find out where the hell my damn shopping is. So sorry, everyone. I've got a little bit of a delay, but more pies on top of this as per usual. So bear with me, everyone.
But yeah, poisoning the dark core was actually a bug that we kept. Because yeah, there's like NPCs have like these timers, and one of these timers at the time, it's not now, was reserved for poison. And the Dark Core decided to use that timer to do its attacks for some reason, which meant that when you poisoned it, the timer slowed down to the rate of poison, which meant that it kind of attacked slower. And that was never intended. Um, yeah, poisoning the Dark Core was a bug, but it was cool. It was a bug that eventually turned into meta, and that's awesome. That's awesome. Um, Best bug I've found. Oh god. I found too many. I can't pick one. I can't pick one, and they were funny at the time. Like when I made Runespan, for some reason, like the wizard's head grew massive, and was the size of an island. That was pretty funny. Um, I've lost count the number of times I've made PvP attack the person attacking. Do I see Fortic auto attacking like that? So I've spoken a lot about Fortic auto attacking over the time, and like I think it's the reason why my approach over the years to Fortic auto attacking hasn't been to go, oh, this is a bug, get rid of it, get rid of it. Like continuous Fortic auto attacking was a bug. That was attack swing resetting, which we could have put in, but it was just too strong. But like it was, so I used to play Quake as well as Unreal Tournament, and in Quake there is this thing called strafe jumping, where you kind of use your sideways momentum to make forwards momentum go faster. So I kind of had an appreciation for these things that are totally unintended, but actually create quite interesting game mechanics. So I kind of wanted that, but I think I've always pitched it as kind of like, okay, this is great, and I'll leave this in because like the top end have some like mechanical skill to do. Um, but I always kind of wanted to kind of integrate it a bit better because it was very obscure. My phone, my there we go. It was a very obscure thing. Um, so I've always like my intentions for TA was to kind of find a way to kind of bake it back into the meta and make it um, a bit more easy for a new player to find if they wanted to. And but yeah, so doesn't Fortic promote people to use illegal software to Fortic for them? Um, that's a difficult one. Like at the end of the day, using illegal software will get you banned. Don't do it. Um, like it certainly wasn't in the design. I think there's an awful lot of stuff in RuneScape that does promote you to want to be able to create illegal software. Like I don't know, like when I've forgotten the name of the skill now. Divination. When Divination came out, I created a piece of software that played a tune every 20 minutes because I wanted to get the enriched. So like people will try and do these things all the time anyway. I don't think it necessarily promotes it, but I can understand why. Macros was something I had on my to-do list. Was something I wanted to um, give simple macros. So was something I wanted to do. So when I was working on a bunch of combat improvements, one of the things on that list was a macroing system, which I prototyped, but I never really got to fruition. And like it wasn't as the macroing system wasn't as important as all of the things that allowed new players to come into the game to get acclimated to the game easier. A macroing system is like a end user thing. It's like an end game thing. It's a power user thing. Um, but it was something that I wanted to do. It just never got priority, I'm afraid.
Right, done. Thank God. Oh, already. I've probably missed some good stuff. Damn it. Alrighty. So we talked about you being a content developer on your own for a project.
Yeah.
What was the project? The first one you released?
It would have been the Christmas update. So I think it's called a Towering Feast. So it was the Christmas event
Spot on.
that took place in the Wizard's Tower. Um, so when I was doing lots of concepts for Christmas, Mod Osborne hilariously was my design reviewer for that one at that time. Um, and like I am terrible at writing stories. Absolutely terrible. And like what they wanted from me was this this magical Christmas story. And I was coming up with all of these things and don't know if you know, but Mod Osborne is very good at writing stories.
Mhm.
So everything I was coming up with, he was like, this no. And that was fair enough. I'm just not very good at writing stories. Like I can write narrative. But I prefer to bake my narrative into the gameplay rather than, to do chat and things like that. Um, so what I ended up creating was a very loose narrative, to be honest with you. It's all the wizards come together and they have a party. It's not quite going right, so let's fix all that with a bunch of mini games because I can make mini games. Um, so like there was a bunch of things that I created. One of them was like Christmas on Scape Rune. So
Oh,
it was this very dystopian Christmas where like Christmas trees were like coming down from the ceiling, but they were kind of droopy and dark, and you kind of so Christmas wasn't happy and fun on Scape Rune. It was dark and dreary, and everyone hated it, and Santa was this big bad. Do you know what I mean? Um, and like that was the strongest thing I had narratively, but Mod Osborne turned to me and went, John, it's Christmas, and people want to be uplifted at Christmas. They don't want to go on this this very dystopian and macabre thing that makes them a bit sad. So
has Raven ever been a part of a Christmas event? Because if not, that explains it.
I was actually sitting next to Raven, so maybe some of that at the time, maybe some of that kind of ebbed from him. I don't know.
Oh
Um,
dear.
but like yeah, it became very obvious that I was a bit more about game mechanics and game systems and should never write the plot line or narrative for a quest ever. Um,
So after Christmas 2011, what did you do next?
so after that would have been Runespan. So
Whoa, oh boy. Okay, so
what a beast.
you were a part of single-handedly changing how runecrafting is trained. Full stop.
Changing is a nice agnostic word for you to use there, Shawnee. Thank you. Um,
So
so
I
so Runespan is what I like to call a Marmite update.
yes.
Like Runespan isn't okay. Runespan is you ruined runecrafting, or oh, thank God I finally get to level it. Like Runespan. So Runespan originally was only supposed to be this D&D that you played. Um, Hilariously, the core aims for Runespan got picked up again and eventually got turned into the Rune Goldberg machine. Because what actually happened was they were kind of like no one's training rune crafting. They like no one enjoys rune crafting. Create a D&D so that people can do some rune crafting. But I created a bunch of concepts, but I was like, look. The problem you're not solving a problem here. You're just creating a D&D for people to siphon XP. Like, wait a second, didn't we nerf effigies for the like very recently at the time? because all people were doing was they were getting effigies and leveling their rune crafting anyway because they hated leveling rune crafting. So how about we come up with a way to train rune crafting um, that people don't hate. That so it's an alternative track. So like I'd already come up with like weird mini games at the time for like siphoning runic energy out of things. So I had like there were barriers at the time. There weren't nodes, so I had like barriers where like you'd like navigate a dungeoneering style maze where you'd siphon the energy out of the barriers. I had like a competitive mini game where like two people on a track together, and the barriers would kind of grow back, and you could do things to affect the other person. So you could take the runic energy and then siphon it back into the other guy's one, so that the door closed behind them and stuff. But like this whole idea of like siphoning runic energy out of something that wasn't a rune, that kind of spawned from the fact that I kind of always viewed the runic altars as this like highly concentrated magical source. I'm ad-libbing here. Don't take this as like canon or anything. And I think the Law Council will kill me if any of you think this is real lore. Because at the time when I was coming up with the Runespan, it was actually quite controversial. Like an awful lot of like the mainstay people in RuneScape didn't like what I was doing with this whole idea that like the world has this runic energy inside of it, and you can pull this runic energy out. Like I remember, I think it was Mod John A at the time just didn't like he was working a lot with the Wizard's Tower at the time, and he wasn't a very big fan of like my idea of like siphoning runic energy, and like these runic caches are just like highly concentrated things. But the idea of like pulling runic energy out of it came out, but like I just basically broke down the problem. It's like no one's training runecrafting because it's just depressing to train. So I was like, how about we allow them to, get XP, but you don't get to make money, you don't get to make runes. But this is obviously pre EOC, remember? So runes had an awful lot of worth at the time. So you could make that choice of like um,
Excuse me.
only ever getting XP or this. So it did have the best XP in the game, and with 2020 hindsight, it being slightly too AFK on the design. I'll come into the design versus the real world in a bit. Um, but like getting slightly more XP but not getting any runes, it felt like a fine gambit. Um, that's not how it played out, of course. But like that's how the runespan came about, and like this whole idea of runic energy kind of changed into this different environment where it's like a nebulous environment, and the runic energy is absolutely chaotic. And hey, what about if like that's actually where the runecrafting guild is? The runecrafting guild's in the center of this nebulous environment because it's in a different plane anyway, right? So let's do that, and then came up with these different like and then it kind of evolved into like okay, like so you've got these islands where the nodes kind of settle on, and then like you can use that runic energy and re-divert it to go over some cool bridges that turn you into like all the cool things that the bridges turn into.
So,
um
so Runespan, correct me if I'm wrong,
mhm.
it had a teaser event prior to it going live, did it not?
Yes, yeah, it did. Oh god, that. So
Oh god,
like
that.
I really enjoy creating little events and things that put a bit of joy on somebody's face. So I went to town on this little event, where like basically there was like a worldwide broadcast, and the wizards were appeared on the world, and they were creating the portal to the rune span and stuff. And Mod Timbo at the time was like, oh, this is really, really cool. So like he put down like a countdown to this teaser, because we before that we had the was it it's the what do you got, strange power
A
for
strange path to
dungeoneering.
engineering, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
the
So he,
friend,
he
yeah.
put down this giant countdown clock on the RuneScape website. um so this eventually, like, people were really, really hyped for it, and they turned up, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I've got this cool scripted event where they turn up, they create a portal, and things like the animals escape from the portal, and like it was it was great apart from one thing. The event happened and then it went away. and then there was nothing to do. It was just like a scripted set piece. So, but like the worlds were packed because there was a giant timer on the website, and like I remember people being really, really annoyed because they turned up. This cool portal had been created, and then the portal disappeared, and they couldn't do anything with it. They just kind of watched the scripted set piece, and everyone was so angry at me. Not internally, just the players are like, "What?" And in hindsight, like if we actually left the portal up and allowed players to go into the Runespan, like if that was, you know, the update day of Runespan and like the players appeared on top of the Wizard's Tower and did all that cool stuff, like that would have gone down well, right?
Mm.
That would have been awesome. Um, but that's not what we did. Like people stayed up like until like 3, 4 a.m. They had work the next day because they thought something really big and awesome was happening, and like people were angry because they just saw like a 15-minute set piece of the wizards doing cool stuff and things escaping out, and then they could do nothing, and it was really, really underwhelming.
S-
But
s-
yeah, like we learned a lot from that. We didn't put like giant timers up on the website if we're just going to do a little teaser. Because
So,
yeah,
so we come to release, and then I'm gonna let you take this story because you love sharing this story. In fact, I believe you shared it on your Twitter only a few months ago, actually, about Runespan.
oh
So it came to
it done
release. What
it done
happened?
broke.
What happened?
So the original design of the Runespan is very different to what we have now. So the original design for the Runespan was. Do you remember me saying I used to take part in competitive skilling events?
Yes.
So the original design for the Runespan was that the nodes would stay up until they have been siphoned. And when one node was siphoned out, the next one would appear somewhere else. And the original idea of the Runespan was that it was this kind of min-maxing balancing event where you hunt down the best nodes to get the best XP, but you had to make sure you had enough runes in order to go over all the bridges. So I was very much thinking about this kind of min-maxing um, thing. And the way this worked is we have like what in RuneScape we have these invisible things called controllers. They're basically like invisible NPCs that can run script. Um,
Think Tears of Guthix, where there's an NPC above the waterfall who triggers it, as an
yeah,
example.
exactly. So and the way this worked is basically when a node spawned, a controller spawned underneath it. Um, that kind of kept track of it. The controller had like a count. When that count got to zero, that got destroyed. That sent a message to another controller to say, okay, right, that's now depleted. Spawn another one randomly using it's like the node spawn using like a weighted algorithm. Um, and this was great in principle, but what eventually happened was that little controller that spawns the node and looks after it duplicated itself somehow.
Okay.
So on release, what happened was there were nodes everywhere because it had duplicated itself, and then the duplicated one duplicated itself, and then all of a sudden, like the whole of the rune span is just covered in nodes. And I remember Mod Mark coming to me and going, "So the Runespan is covered in nodes. Everyone's getting the best XP rates, and they're not having to run around. Like, is this a problem?" And I'm like, "Well, no, because there's like a cap on the balancing. So they're getting more XP than we want them to get. So the original XP rates for the Runespan, so top end best XP rates was supposed to be 75k per hour. It's not what we have now. So they were getting like 100k XP per hour, which at the time wasn't like it wasn't like, oh shit, we need to do a rollback. It was kind of like, oh, we need to fix this quickly.
Hmm.
So we got Mod Ash, Mod Easty, myself, all looking at this code, and nobody could find this duplication. So we put out one thing that we thought would fix it, and that had the opposite effect. All of a sudden, the nodes were deleting themselves very aggressively to the point where there were no nodes in the rune span anymore. Um, and then the next day, we did another thing where the nodes duplicated themselves again, but not so aggressively. So we're like, oh, we're slowly getting there. But it was like, I think it was 3 days So unit testing and integration tests in RuneScript, I will come back to in a bit. Note that one down. It was like 3 days at this point, and the rune span had been broken in so many different ways, and nobody could find a way to fix it. Um, and I hadn't slept in 3 days,
Oh,
and
bless you.
yeah, because I'm still in my probation, and I've just released a ridiculously broken thing, and I've already proven I can't create a quest very well. You know what I mean? Um, and people are getting XP rates like fast. And as a RuneScape player, I know like the weight that is on this. I hadn't slept for 3 days, and this is one thing about me is like I have this thing where I get stressed, and then I just reach this moment of zen.
Yes,
It's
I've
like
seen this. I've seen this.
I've reached a point, and I have a moment of clarity. Um, and then I just go into a different world, and this is like Super Saiyan Mod Pi that comes out when when the world breaks. Um, and what I wrote was I completely rewrote the way in which nodes spawned in the rune span, but I wrote it as a hotfix that could be deployed whilst the game was running. Um, and like this
How in God's
so
name do you write a hotfix? So just to make people understand this. Now, a hotfix obviously is service script only, and there's only very specific things you can do with a hotfix. So how do you somehow come up with a solution to this in a hotfix without having to reboot the game?
um So what I had to write was I had to patch into the old system to make that slowly turn itself off. And then I also had to complete piggyback on the old system to make a completely new system that used the old controllers and create like ran completely new code. So I wrote something that over the period of about an hour slowly turned off the old system and moved all of these controllers onto using the new system. Um, and that's how the RuneSpan works now. It's kind of like nodes are up for a set amount of time, and then they disappear, and then they come along. And like those, instead of like creating a new controller for each new node, it reuses the same controller, so it can't duplicate. It doesn't add anymore. It just kind of runs in its own little self-contained system. Um,
You can bring that back. I was gonna say you literally
sorry.
just faded out then when you did that. Ugh.
Yeah.
I
But
mean, it sounds mental, but I mean, fair
Modesty
play
says
to
to
you.
this day it's the scariest hotfix he's ever deployed to the game.
You see, the thing
Um,
is, I've spoken
it
to him
was
about that because obviously
it
it
was
came up in
something
conversation.
like I think it was like about 1,000 lines of code.
What would they have done if it went wrong?
We were probably looking at a rollback at this point, and it had been 3 days, so it's a very angry rollback. You know what I mean?
Then
We would have just turned off the rune span. We would have ditched the whole update, and I probably would have lost my job because I just spent
wow.
6 months developing something that we've just removed from the game.
Then fair play for pulling off a clutch and a half, sir. That's impressive. Wow.
Yeah, like after that point, like people, like I got people realized that yeah, I can do this. I can make content, and that's what eventually made me pass my probation. Was like one of the most important skills for a JMod isn't being able to create perfect code. It is when
Reactive,
when the
reactive.
game really breaks, like, and I'm just a little bit really breaks. You're not like a deer in headlights, and you're able to fix it whilst the game is live. Like we don't like rebooting our servers outside of update days. We will do anything we can to try and. We're very proud of our uptime. Our uptime, like our lowest uptime is 99%. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Like that's a bad week for us. We're like 99.9% uptime on our game, and we're very proud of that. Um, but yeah, man, that was stressful. Like I literally didn't sleep for days. And yeah, like Super Saiyan Pi has come out a few times. But like it came out like there was a period in my life where I was about to lose my home, and then all of a sudden,
Jesus.
bam, I sorted it out. It's just like,
I mean,
but
someone's
yeah,
asked like, what other times? Like, there's been times when I've been there. Like, invention, the day two of Invention's release was a real Like I spoke about with Shogun about like on history, and like Day Two of Invention's release was brutal in the stuff that came up. In fact,
Oh yeah,
in
the hand
fact, I
cannons,
believe
man.
I believe not even hand cannons. Like the hand cannons was day one, but like day two was I believe you were involved in this one actually was when you killed someone in the wilderness, it disconnected you from the game. That
Oh
was
right, yeah,
Invention
yeah.
Day Two, and then we had additional stuff on top of that as well. Like
Oh
that was
yeah.
pretty crazy.
There's quite a few times where combat has broken at its core, and I've had to kind of rewrite it a few times,
Mm.
again in a hot fix. And again, that's another one Easty doesn't like doing because the combat system is quite big and intricate. But you just got to.
Okay, so Runespan, we've got. I wanted to get the Runespan story out of the way because I mean I didn't know that you were at that point in your life either. So I knew about obviously what you did to fix it, but
Yeah, like
it's
the cool
astonishing.
thing is like I just also
Oh my
there's
goodness,
some
Cash.
other stuff in
Sorry,
there's some
Cash Bang
other
just hosted me off his Runescape stream. Sorry, my bad. I just completely jumped
It's all
over you.
right, man.
Oh,
But
sorry.
like there's some other stuff like the runic staff back then was like a ridiculous thing to code. Like a staff that could store spells. Like no one everyone said it couldn't be done. I was very proud of that.
So
And like that stuff like at the point that released should have been like a beacon to tell people that I was a Castle Wars player because that staff was tailor made to be magic defense heavy and something that someone who is a flag runner would take with them. Um,
so we go from Runespan now. Historically, correct. EOC is your next fin. Is that correct?
yeah, so
Right.
EOC had already been in development for a while. I had to get EOC out, the Runespan out the door first. So um, mod Chrysel and mod Wraith and mod Avatar had already kind of laid down a lot of the foundation of EOC at the point I turned up. Um, like I still got there early enough. I still got to like join in a lot of stuff, but like all of the abilities were designed, like the all of the scaling for accuracy and damage had already been designed. Like the roll to hit, etc., had been designed. Like an awful lot had been designed, and I was there just kind of converting content. And I got to change the poison system to not to be slightly different.
So
Um,
EOC.
yeah, because
Let's
yeah,
let's dive into all of this now. So we'll talk about this quite extensively. I feel now. Obviously, we can talk about it from the start, as you mentioned. You didn't join there from the start. So you joined
no,
as the news post had already gone out. Is that correct? When blogs had already started coming out about it, was it known as an update when you joined the team?
when I joined the team, no.
Yes, you weren't. Okay, gotcha.
When I No, I don't believe it. Oh, it's difficult. So when I joined the combat team, um, maybe.
Okay. So when it comes to EOC, now this is where my lack of not playing back then. Obviously, EOC is a whole different kettle of fish back then. If we were to talk about what you were involved with on EOC as an update, what stuff at the initial release were you involved with in doing?
So an awful lot of it was converting the game. So the guys had created what is essentially an Excel spreadsheet, and like converting every NPC in the game and every object in the game. So you'd say like, okay, right, this is a tier, it's dragon dagger, right? So it's a tier 60 dagger, and it would print out the code. But I also got involved in again, I was the one that ripped out poison. Again, not my design decision, but I got involved in that. So I got involved in a lot of core systems as well. Um, but like I wasn't a code monkey because I was very much brought into the discussions at the time I joined, but the foundation was very much um, pretty strongly laid at that point.
So if we look at EOC as an update, we had they had. I'll eventually snap out of it. They had a beta in June of 2012. The update released November 2012. There was a beta from June 2012. There's a couple of things I'm going to use here based on the posts that I see and comments I've seen. So one question I've seen, for example, is what was the full process in EOC beta when thresholds originally gave you 15% adrenaline instead of consuming it?
Um, so I believe the idea was the ultimate was your like payoff. Um, and like your basics, and I think it was thought that that basics and thresholds were roughly similar, because you required 50%. You still required 50% for the threshold then, so you do your basics, so you basically get like this damage ramp, and then spend it, then damage ramp, then spend it, then damage ramp, and then spend it. um I believe that was the initial idea. So basically you'd hit these two thresholds, because if you think about it, if you're if you get stronger attacks at 50% and you gain more adrenaline faster, you kind of get that ramp, and then you get to these ultimate abilities where you spend all of the what you'd gained, and like you dump it, and then you get this kind of, it's very classic archetype in, especially in MMOs, where you get your generator and your spender.
Hmm.
And like I believe that was the original idea. Obviously, when we released it, it was like OP as all hell. Um, but like that was the original idea.
So I'm going to post something in the chat. Some people may or may not be aware of it. Before, of course, we had what we call the target bar and the buff and debuff bar. For example, when you look above a monster bar in the game right now, you see the buffs and debuffs. Back then, you had the interface, the weakness
Yeah,
interface. So how did that come about?
let's have a look at it. I think I know what one you're talking about. I think you're talking about the one that replaced, yeah, the one that
Yeah.
replaced the combat thing. Um, So that was very much basically a target pane. And again, it's like classical MMO. Um, WoW had it, but a lot of other stuff had it as well. Come on. But WoW is your kind of gold standard ability based MMO. So of course you're gonna pull that one out there. But like it is your classic target pane. Like, so you've got to realize that the core aims of EOC wasn't necessarily to rewrite the combat system. The core, so at this time in RuneScape, the membership was in like a slow decline, and our players were getting older. You've probably heard this a lot as well. Players are getting older, they're getting families, and we needed a new breed of player. And so what we did was we kind of surveyed a bunch of people who weren't RuneScape players, and the kind of demographic that we wanted. Thought, okay, so we basically need those school kid players back. Like the kids who play it when they come home from school. So we asked them like what they didn't like. And number one, every time, the combat's too slow and boring. The combat's too slow. Like I click and I wait. It's really boring. So like the point of EOC was to kind of try and get in a new breed of player into RuneScape. That was the core reason. So if things that kind of look familiar, compared to other things, and about like what someone coming to the game would expect, um, that's why they look that way. It looks similar to WoW because that is something that's a player playing an MMO at that time would have expected, and the idea was to kind of deal with that core complaint that the combat system was too slow and boring, and no one like, we got a lot of feedback saying that they didn't want to do it.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I could be incorrect. When EOC released, it was in essence full manual only. There was no revolution, nothing. Is that correct?
So I believe in beta, yes, but we did put in momentum, if you remember momentum.
No, I didn't use it. I know of it. I just didn't. I never used momentum.
Oh, it's awful. So momentum, momentum V1, I think, was like increased auto attacks. I'm trying to remember now.
Hold on.
And then we changed it to randomly do some abilities, I believe.
The minimum hit for
Um,
auto attacks changed to 24% weapon damage, and the maximum changed to 120.
yeah, so you autos did a bit more, but you just couldn't do it. But I think at some point we did allow momentum to just randomly proc basics. Um,
But didn't momentum used to be an ability? That right? Is that correct?
so yeah, that was how you turn it on and off.
Wow, it wasn't just switching
Yeah.
mode. It was an
So
ability.
think of it like insight, which you turn
Gotcha.
on and off. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, this is just like stuff like it's pretty crazy when you think about it. Back then, were you aware of? Well, I'm sure you were, but when it comes to PvP in
Yeah.
EOC back then, what were the discussions?
So I've got to remember his name. I think it was So Wrecked. Was it
Yes,
So Wrecked
that's
I was speaking
correct.
to?
Well, I mean, as
So
in the person, but I don't know if it was the person
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
speaking to.
yeah. Yeah, it was So Wrecked I was speaking to at the time. It became immediately obvious we needed to do stuff for PvP. So, um, but when we were doing EOC, there was this constant mental kind of like, is it bad or are they just not liking the change in status quo? It was bad, but like you had to continuously ask yourself that, like, oh, are they just not used to it yet? You know what I mean? Um, and like EOC PvP was very, very different. And I'll come on to this again in a minute, like one of the core failings of EOC at the time as well. But it was so different for PvP. Um, and re like EOC as a whole, basically took everything that you knew about the game. It took all of the metas that you spent years learning. It took an awful lot of your comfort zone and just kind of took your items, completely changed them, and just oh, learn it new now. You know what I mean? And like that, it happened all over the game. But I think PvP was like hit the hardest. Like you've got this because RuneScape PvP classically is brutal. It's like the death penalty is ridiculous. And it's not a good learning environment. And when you completely change the meta like this, like the balancing was everywhere. Like it was great. It was fun for PVM, but yeah, the PvP, like, yeah, it just wasn't where we wanted it to be. But it kind of got there. If you speak to an EO like PvPers back when they liked EOC PvP, like it took World Event 2 to provide that environment for people to kind of
Yeah,
pick it up and learn it and then start to enjoy it. And then that's kind of like when you started to see like this EOC PvP like core group of people start to pick it up. And then obviously that kind of we brought out war bands later, and that got much bigger with lots of clans, and we kind of got to what we wanted. Um, oh man, level 200.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
forgot
I
about
was,
that.
I was going to mention that. So combat level going up to going up to 200. I mean, why was that decision made? If you can remember.
I think people got annoyed with 138. I think they wanted a nice round number to end. Like it was literally that simple. So they changed the combat level thing so that when you completed, you got like a big. It looked better. Whereas again, it's remember the core aims of EOC was to make it more enticing to a brand new player, and 138 ending at 138 is weird. But as a RuneScape player, you kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, it's 138
So
or
people.
126 before that.
So people in the chat, obviously, there's people in here I can clearly see have been around at the time that EOC was released. So if you all have some
Yeah.
stories to share on that, by all means, we can talk about that. Right, I want to get to the crucial one, which is, in your opinion, what do you think went wrong with EOC when it released in RuneScape?
Oh, mate. Um. So. Oh. So it comes down to we released it before it was ready. There are several reasons for that. The perhaps the biggest reason, and sunk cost fallacy comes into this a little bit. But the biggest reason was, we'd decided we were doing this thing. We needed to do this thing to get new players into the game. But we'd created a whole backlog of updates that relied on this. So when we wrote EOC, it's not just KK. Like we completely rewrote the animation system and the way in which the player like presented themselves. So it was even like skilling updates that the code was branched off of EOC. So we got to this point where we're like, if we don't release EOC, we can't release all of these updates, and our update roadmap is it's we've got nothing to give to our players. Um, with 2020 hindsight, probably should have done something. Probably should have held it back a bit longer, worked with the players longer. But um, we very much felt this pressure to release it so that we could release other things, and we felt that like our players are smart. They'll get used to it. It will be all right. It's a big. You're right. It is a drastic change. Um, but they'll learn it. And and when they see this cool new content that we've got for them, yeah, they'll be really hyped and they'll love it. That's not what happened. A lot of players quit. And we ended up making old school, and that's awesome. Um, I like to troll RS3 players quite a bit, because a lot of them say, "Oh yeah, what's your favorite thing about ESC? What's your favorite thing about ESC?"
Created old school.
And yeah, it created old school. Like, you gotta remember, like I'm I played the game for many years, and when ESC came out, I saw an awful lot of my friends quit, and then old school came back, and all of them came back. And like, oh, if you look at it objectively, actually, that is the best thing to come out of EOC. As much as it hurts to say it, there are many awesome things that came out of EOC. But yeah,
Do you think if Revolution was with EOC on release, it would have changed the perception of that update?
I think it would have made it a hell of a lot more palatable, but I don't think it would have changed the perception.
Okay.
So this is something that if someone comes from a non-RuneScape background, I give them the talk. Um, so one of the cardinal sins I'd say EOC made was it didn't kind of respect what RuneScape was to the people that played it. So you go to your day job and your boss is hard on you. You come home from school where the teachers have been hard on you, and then your mum's telling you to do your chores. And like RuneScape was this kind of safe place for you to escape. It was your comfort zone. It was the place where you enjoyed turning up. Um, what AOC did was it kind of took that safe space, and it took that world that made you happy, and it just turned it upside down. Um, and like whenever someone creates content, I'm always kind of like, you've got to be respectful of what RuneScape is to all of the people that play it. You get like, don't get me wrong, we should push the game, change the game, but don't don't change that world. Don't change that place that makes them happy. You want RuneScape to be that place where they come when things get tough. They want them to come on and speak to their friends. You want them to just be able to go to the corp masses that I spoke about. You want them to go to their PvP clans or their Castle Wars clans or their Skilling clans, and go and do something together and just enjoy chilling out on TeamSpeak, chatting rubbish whilst doing something on RuneScape. And what EOC did was it fundamentally messed with that. Um, and like, that is something we have
It
very much
it kind
learnt
of
from.
affected that culture,
Yeah,
would you say, right? Like that culture of
yeah.
RuneScape. Because when you log in, it's
Um,
like a brand new game. Which, of course, if you're a veteran RuneScape player, it's like, well, what's happened to the
you're like,
game that
whoa, what
I
is this?
know?
Like, it is much better. So
Oh, absolutely.
an interesting period in EOC is when we released EOC, I'd actually applied for the game engine team. So we
Okay.
released EOC. Um, And not long after, I did some post stuff, but I'd already got my place in the game engine team. Not long after, I joined the game engine team. Went, okay, right, I'm done. Bye. Um, and I joined the game engine team. But obviously, I'm still in the office. I still play RuneScape, and I kind of watch this. Um, and I had kind of like my heart sunk. Um, I knew an awful lot at the time. There was an awful lot of balancing issues that I wanted to fix. So what I did was I designed Legacy. I designed Legacy, and I broke down exactly mechanically all the things that I felt was wrong with EOC. A lot of balancing tweaks. If you're around then, I completely rebalanced the whole of EOC when I did Legacy. I completely rebalanced it from the ground up to be a lot better. Um, and I've been in the game engine team for about a year at this point, and it's weird. So I said earlier on that, like, I didn't know when I turned up at Jagex that it was a creative job, because I'd made my own games, but they were mimics of other things. I'd never been a game designer before then.
Hmm.
Um, so I didn't know, but at the time, but that I had this kind of creative streak. And when I moved to the game engine team, I was purely technical, and no, all of a sudden, this creative streak that I'd found wasn't being scratched anymore. And I found myself like, oh, so in the content I'm technically frustrated, and in engine I'm creatively frustrated. As an outlet, I designed Legacy. I broke down all the things that I felt was wrong with EOC at the time. Obviously, I didn't design Revolution. That was a player, a very awesome player. Thank you very much. I forget her name now. Um, but if anyone remembers the name, please give them a shout out because they're awesome. Um, and that eventually turned into Missing, and that's it. Um, that eventually turned into the legacy update. It turned into it turned into the complete rebalance of the combat system at the time. I've still got the spreadsheet somewhere where I broke down the ability balancing. Um, so the like because people forget the balancing for original AOC was a bit everywhere. Um, and like at the time, the person in charge of engine didn't want me to go back to content. But Mod Pips, who was the EP at the time, little did I know that Mod Connor had access to my private space on our internal documentation. And he read this, and then and this was at Christmas, so I'd left for Christmas. Mod Connor went, "Hey, Mod Pips, look at this." And then Mod Pips picked it up. And then I came back. I remember it. I came back literally the first day after Christmas. Mod Pips. Sorry, I'm
Are
just
you,
gonna.
are you looking at it?
No.
Oh,
Um,
I thought you were looking
Mod
at it.
Mod Mod Pips turned to me and was just literally grabbed me as I was sitting in my seat and went, "You're working in content again, and you're making legacy, and you're fixing all of these problems that you've highlighted in C." Um,
So at the time,
and
just for clarification purposes, he was essentially product owner of Runescape at that time, right? Just so people are
yeah,
aware.
it was EP, so
Yeah,
executive producer.
gotcha.
Um, and yeah, it was awesome. And I think the 2014 Legacy was like we did a hell of a lot to fix a lot of the damage that we'd done. Um, like there were still things like there was a bunch of stuff that we'd removed because it didn't fit what we like the nice balancing of EOC. So like Crumble Undead, who remembers that? Like that's still gone. Like there was a whole bunch of things. Like someone mentioned earlier, like miasmic spells, they got removed. Well, that's because we didn't know what element to make miasmic spells. So we're just gonna have the four. Do you remember like blood fire spells? Do you remember that? Um, but yeah, like that was an awesome time because we did an awful lot of positive things to get RuneScape back on track. We released Old School for the people that wanted that. For the people that didn't want to restart Old School, we did Legacy. And like if you scroll back on my Twitter, you'll find the day that Legacy released because um, I had a big grin on my face because there was this picture of the wilderness was full again, and it was just this dead world for absolutely ages, and then like all of a sudden, oh my god, the wilderness has all the PKs back, and like we gained like a lot of people came back for Legacy, and I was incredibly happy that I got to give people their comfort space back. Um, like it's one of my proudest moments is
Oh,
just getting people some of what they wanted back. Obviously nowadays legacy is very much a legacy. Like nowadays people have kind of decided what camp they're going to be in, and you'll either be in revolution or full manual. Like legacy isn't used that much. It's still used by, I don't know the number, but it's still used by quite a few people. um
do you want to see the first mock-up of Legacy Mode's fixed interface?
oh dear god.
Enjoy. Legacy Mode on a fixed interface as part of the first
Oh,
image
there it is.
released.
Yeah. Oh, I can't. I forgot we brought the pillars back. I remember. And I remember there was this big debate about what we go for. Did we go for brown legacy or blue legacy? Like, what do they want? And in the end, we went for brown because it was legacy. So we
Yeah,
went for the
and
most
then
legacy one we could find.
there's the brown one with the mock-up back then as well. Those icons, man, they're something to look at, I have to say. So yeah, Legacy Mode was part of the Players Poll 2014, and it won by I think it was like 80% on the yes or something like that. It done very well. Obviously, they wanted it and they got it. So fair play to you, obviously getting the update done, but also to Pips for having the wearable, and obviously Connor for finding it on your Confluence
Yeah.
to with the wearable to
But
do
yeah,
it.
like massive shout out to my Pips at the time. Like he was, like he became EP the week before EOC was released. And like the turnaround that he managed to pull off, like big props to the guy for, going, you know what, I'm just gonna give the guys what they want and we need to do this. He was very much on the players' side at that point.
So just before Legacy Mode, you mentioned about going to the engine team. Correct me if I'm wrong. Involved in HTML5, is that correct?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
talk to me about. I mean, I don't imagine we'll stay on the topic for long, but talk to me about HTML5.
So HTML5 was this bleeding edge tech, and like so the buzz that we had from. Do you remember? If you played the game long enough, do you remember the release day of RuneScape HD? It was an absolutely awesome day. Everyone like loved it on release, and they were like, "Oh my god, we have hands." There were balls back then. There were no fingers, but we had hands, and that was cool. But it was like beautiful. And like the tech team, like again hadn't done any. They felt that oh, we used to be like this really big innovative team. So like HTML5 was this thing that allowed us to stay on web browsers, which was a USP at that time that you could play it anywhere, anytime. Do you remember that tagline?
Yes.
Um, so HTML5 was a way for us to get a more modern game engine. It was a complete re-architect of the client. It's like the code base is very very different to the the Java client. Um, Unfortunately, like HTML5, like the tech at the time, like wasn't where we needed it to be. I remember the guy who pitched HTML5 and was making it was literally editing the JavaScript engine to try and get more performance out of it. Like it was an absolutely brilliant idea. We did execute it, but it wasn't ready. But hey, like that eventually, that code base was used as a base upon which to write NXT. Like an awful lot of the architecture written for HTML5 is what NXT is now using, even though one's JavaScript and one's C++. Um, it also gave me a lifelong hatred for JavaScript. The day I'm sorry guys, but the day we decommissioned the com app and I no longer had to keep up the JavaScript code base was a very happy day for me.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember your excitement about Comat being killed off. Ugh,
Well, yeah, com app was one of my updates actually.
it was. Yep, I remember that as well.
Um, yeah, that was a roller coaster because we had to make that in like 3 months. And com app was basically the HTML5 client with all of the graphical things completely stripped out of it. Like literally, like there was code in the HTML5 client that was like, if visible client do this, and the com app didn't. Um,
Would you, historically speaking, obviously Comap gives you the ability to talk in chats, give you the ability to see GE offers. Would it have, if it had more work historically, would it have been allowed to do stuff like ports and so on and so forth?
it would have had an interface to ports. However, like the front end is not our interface system.
Right.
So the front end, I've forgotten the API we use, but basically it's a web front end. It is very much a HTML5 website. Um, we did not want to load the HTML5 client on phones because I don't know if you noticed, but it doesn't work very well on a Core i7. So let's not put that on a phone. Um, but we could strip it down and then basically make the app show what is effectively a website. Because if you remember, you could go to the com app on a website and have like your com app on the side whilst you were not playing the game, because you can be logged into both at the same time. Um, but yeah, like the com app you to was a way for you to interact with the game when you weren't playing the game, and it was a really cool thing. But obviously, we have RuneScape Mobile now. So what's interesting is the com app connected to the lobby. To Because obviously the lobby gives you a presence in RuneScape without you actually being in RuneScape. And an awful lot of that code's still around. I'm still trying to convince the mobile guys to port a lot of the
Oh,
com app code
please,
over.
dear God,
But
yes.
they've got more important things to do, like actually
Yeah,
releasing
of
releasing
course.
it. But like, yeah, like it, the com app was cool, but again, it was this code base that we were keeping around that wasn't great. And we have RuneScape Mobile now, which is arguably much, much better.
And
Um,
HTML5 led to NXT, so it turned out for the better
yeah,
for sure. Like,
yeah. In the long term, long run, it turned out much better for us.
okay, let's move on. I have on my list Lava Strike Worms. Were you involved in creation of them?
So Chris L did the original one. I was involved in bringing it back. But I'm just going to take a quick break because I need the toilet.
How dare you? Of
So
course, crack on.
if you look at the size of my water bottle, like you're gonna need to pee.
Crack on.
But I will be back momentarily.
No problem. Oh man, so while John cracks on with that, first of all, I hope you're all enjoying this. Please let me know what you think of stuff like this. And if you don't know, next Saturday I'm going to be talking to Kyle, also known as Mod Ramen. In this similar format, we're going to talk about Ramen's journey to Jagex. We'll talk about his creation of AOD, his creation of Solak, and anything else that he wants to talk about. I think it's going to be really fun to do this. Um, I'm sure he'll bring up Lania Care in some way, shape, or form. And yes, I do remember the unlisted video of Chris L's departure where they reenacted Jon Snow's death. It was hilarious. I joined RuneScape just as that happened, I believe. I'm really glad you're enjoying this. Can we have more pips or more marks sometime? It's up to them. I can. I mean, I don't know how to get. I don't have a direct line to them, so to speak. Not in a friendly way to ask them. But if there's anyone you want to see on these kind of streams, let me know. And I can try and get them on, and we can talk about stuff. But I'm having a lot of fun doing this. It was a random idea that I just had, and I was like, let's try it. And I'm really enjoying these stories. I think they're really good fun, and I'd love. I've already had a stream with Shogun. He was my pilot episode, so to speak. I've already held a stream with Mod Shogun, and it's on my YouTube channel, which I will now cheekily link because I don't have a custom link because I don't have enough subscribers, so I have to link with a really garbage approach. You might hear this video. Can I pause it in time? Yes, I can. So if you really want to, I interviewed Shogun on this video here. Um, so that's there if you want to watch that after the stream, by all means. Me and Shogun talked about a lot of stuff for all that time as well. So with Shogun, now it's Pi. Next will be Ramen, and I'll see if I can get anyone else if they're up for it. It's really up to them. It's them using their free time to come and talk to me. So you have to bear that in mind. This isn't an official RuneScape stream, so it's not during work time and so on and so forth. So if they're doing that, they're doing it off their own back, so give them credit for that one. And just before we jump back in, because John's back, there's one thing I hope that RuneScape streams somehow do. I don't know if it's possible. I'd love at some point if they did like if they had a build of the game from like 2014. It'd be pretty cool just to see how far the game's come in 6 years and so on and so forth. Just stuff like that. I don't know if it's possible anymore, but I think it'd be pretty awesome. But anyway, so we talked about Lava Strike Worms, and you mentioned that you brought them back. Anything to share regarding that, or was it just your run-of-the-mill update?
So yeah, so basically, once we've done Legacy, Mod Dean, do you remember Mod
Of
Dean?
course. So
Um,
just a quick story. So I never met Dean personally. I could hear him from a floor up. because around the office, Dean had one hell of a voice when he got very excited or very passionate about something. So I know about him from that perspective. Yes.
Yeah, I love Mod Dean because one of my favorite things to do with Mod Dean was just to like go, "Hey Dean, come to my desk," and he'd get all excited. He's like a big kid. Um,
Like me,
and
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I'm like
yeah.
that, to be honest.
And then he'd like I'd show him something cool, like a new ability I'd made, or like I'd improved. I'd done like a bunch of combat fixes, like I like to do. And like if anyone's met Dean, they know this one because he'd do it every time we go, mate. Yeah, and like he was so like he'd kind of I'd come into work and like I'd make stuff just for him, and then that would translate to the players being excited, and like because he was so excited for the game and so happy. Um,
I
I'm not
remember when I visited
surprised you saw
Jagex, I
him
saw
shirtless in the
Dean
toilets.
shirtless in the toilet. What? Oh
But
dear.
like I was once at a urinal and Dean wanted to go and the other one was there, and like I'm not kidding you. You know like how racehorse commentators commentate a racehorse like blah, 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 blah. He started doing that behind me, like I could feel his breath whilst I was peeing about my peeing to like try and get me to finish faster, and it was just like, oh man, seriously. And like it's like if you're at a urinal, you're helpless, you're just helpless. But
Amazing.
yeah, but like so when I'd the reason why I was talking about him is because like he knew that I'd been a long time RuneScape player, and like what I get the biggest kick off is like when you guys are happy. Um, so why did you work on PvP, John? Sorry. So like and so he put me on the ninja team because the ninja team was all about giving players what they wanted. So when I'd finished with combat, he put me on the ninja team because it also gave me the agility to do like little combat fixes here and there, and when I wanted. But yeah, like one of the things I wanted to bring back was the Wildy one because it was one of those you get these tropes every once in a while. You get like this thing that people fondly remember. And Chris didn't want to do it because Chris wanted to make Virago and Araxor, and think like hail Chris, you know what I mean? Like those are fantastic bosses. Um, like, but I wanted to bring back the Wildy Worm, so I brought back the Wildy Worm. And if there's one thing you'll know when it's my piece of content, it's when the rewards are OP for a very niche amount of a niche thing. Um, so like, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with the rewards of the Wildy Worm. So the Wildy Worm didn't have those three weapons beforehand. The Wildy Worm, so the Staff of Darkness was an upgraded Staff of Light. The whip, oh my god, like I was so happy with the lava whips back then. Like the idea that you could drag another
Oh, the
player over
spec, right?
scenery. Yeah, yeah. So it drags people over line of sight. So you can drag another player over a river, or yeah, basically Scorpion, right?
Scorpion, yeah.
Or like I played a lot of Castle Wars, right? So if someone's in the castle with the door locked, with holding the flag, screw it, let's get out the lava whip, let's just pull them over to me. You know what I mean? Like I got a massive kick out of making that, and then yeah, the how have I forgotten the bow? I made it. Um, but yeah, the bow had this idea which it kind of stored damage, and that eventually turned into reprisal. Because if you look at the reprisal and the spec for the strike bow, there we go. They're basically very similar. And that was used in PvP. But yeah, like I wanted to bring back the Wildy Worm. It was fondly remembered, and then the lava strikes were a good way to add value to the wilderness because if there's a horse, Morpile beat it. Um,
Right. Okay.
but yeah,
All right. Let's get some popcorn because EOC. I know we could talk about that for days. I wanted to get down to the crux of why we thought EOC
yeah,
initially didn't release as well as
like
it did.
yeah, like I'd like to think that like all the things that I've raised that we've done wrong, we felt we did wrong with EOC. I'd like to we've learned like the learnings are shown. So like the idea that we've released something early, the fact that shelving an update is now a meme should scream volumes that like we don't want to do that again. All of the the
Weapon
players
diversity,
powers of the
right?
player and stuff. Weapon diversity, is all about bringing back something that was cool in the old system that like we came in like a wrecking ball. So you wanted to bring that kind of cool stuff back. Like weapon diversity harks from Darkscape, but that's another conversation probably for a little bit's time.
No,
Um,
that's next. Well,
oh, is it?
that's what I'm leading this up to because I think we have to get down that route. But I mean, to your point, yes. I think from the time I was there, there was an improvement in not trying to throw stuff out that we inevitably would spend so much time fixing post release anyway. That
Yeah.
was just a ball ache. I think
Like
that's
there's
improved.
there's this phrase in project management, in fact, it's like fail fast and early.
Mm,
And that's kind of what we do here, what we do nowadays. So like the bank rework, for instance, we realized at the time that we designed it, we wanted to do this grand thing, and we just didn't have the team to support it. So that's why I got shelved, because rather than do something that isn't right for the game, that rather than do something we can't do right, we'll do it later when we do have time, and we ended up doing it, thank God. But like that was the correct call at the time, because I think we'd picked up RuneScape Mobile around. I'm skipping forwards, but we'd picked up RuneScape Mobile at the time, and we didn't have enough time to do both. Um, but yeah,
so let's go to it. Darkscape. Darkscape, you were lead developer. Darkscape is, in my opinion, what you are most synonymously known for. I'd say even more so than EOC. Because, as you mentioned, you joined EOC in its process. Darkscape,
yeah,
you were there start to finish. Talk to me
yeah.
about how did the idea of Darkscape come about? How did it go from an idea into its release? And then obviously we'll go into the other bits in between.
So it's worth saying that Mod Connor at the time, me and him were friends when Mod Connor was working on Stellar Dawn. So when he came over to RuneScape, we knew him, and like we'd spitball quite often rubbish game design ideas. And I remember him coming over to my desk, and him just being like, when O'Connor came up to me and he went, "John, do you reckon?" I knew I was about to start a roller coaster of what the fuck. Because I knew whatever he said, I'm probably now going to be making it, and um, like, and it wasn't going to be easy, and I was going to have to pull something out of my derriere. But like, he turned to me and went, "What if you had RuneScape, but it was cutthroat PvP, really punishing death mechanics, but also, what if it had the threat levels of Eve?" So really, it was kind of like, what if Eve and RuneScape had a baby? And like like so we kind of spitballed for a bit, and went to a room and designed a bunch of things, and what we came out with was Dartscape, where like you can be killed anywhere. um there is new protection, but those those are guards with a frontal cone FOV. So if you're a sneaky enough assassin, you can sneak into the towns and kill them and come out. But the guards will like gank you if you have a thing.
Hmm.
We've got 3 banks and 3 Gs for low, mid, and high sec. You know what I mean? Like, um, so it came out of just some banter between me and Mod Connor, and then he was just like, "Do you reckon you could get it out in 3 months?" And I was like, "Connor, this is a brand new game.
So
Could you?"
May 2015. Sorry, yeah, May 2015, because it came out September
Yeah,
2015. So 3 months
yeah.
ish. Wow. Okay.
I had 3 months to take RuneScape and turn it into Darkscape. Um,
Wow.
and I had this. I like to pretend I'm I've got Liam Neeson at this point, because I'm a man with a particular set of skills. Um, in that I can make content and edit the engine, and this needed both of them, and it needed, it just needed it done. So I basically put my headphones on for 3 months, and out pops Darkscape. Um, but it needed like changes to an awful lot of the core systems. It needed changes to the engine. It needed, like so what you've got in RuneScape is something known as the locality system, and that's what decides when you open the your achievements what achievement diary you're on. Um, and that's what we piggybacked on to make the different threat levels. But there were tons of holes in it, so I had to patch all of them. Um, and because it was Darkscape, and me and Connor are dads, we decided to play on Darkscape. So what we did was, so do you remember the interface of Darkscape?
The dark,
Do you remember how it's like
the
that
dark
dark red?
red that I wish we had in RuneScape because it's the best
So
looking interface I've ever seen.
that's interesting because what we did was we wrote a Photoshop macro to iterate over every single sprite in the game, darken it, and make it a bit red. And we left Connor's laptop on for like 2 or 3 days. Um, and what we literally just edited the sprites. And what we got out of it was pure gold because it looked
I'm just
lovely.
gonna point this out right now. If anyone from RuneScape is watching this, not including you, Pi, but if anyone who's watching this is a part of the monetization team, I would actually pay money for interface reskins. I would pay money for a Darkscape thematic skin on my interface windows, like because that is quality. Like it looks amazing.
Like
So anyway,
we
before
we've
I get
still
out of
got
there,
we've still got the Darkscape assets lying around, but we
oh
literally just darkened it. It's running on a very old engine. It would need quite a lot of work to make run now.
yeah,
But like we did the same thing with maps. We were like, let's just take the sun and turn it down a bit, um, and make it dark. But when we did that, like the wilderness wasn't special anymore. So that's why you had like the hyper aggressive fog and no mini map icons in the wilderness. This thing just kind of like slowly evolved into what was Darkscape on release. But like like we made so many quick decisions, but like original Darkscape was a mess, man. It was it was beautiful. But like because we'd made it in 3 months, from start to finish, which is one hell of an accomplishment to just make a
mm.
game and release it in 3 months.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's the map that you're referring to. Locality. Enjoy. That is
oh
the
yeah.
locality map. So obviously definition. Like if you're able to remember the green, orange, and red, what do they mean specifically?
So green is low threat. And that meant that there's guards patrolling everywhere basically.
Gotcha.
And those guards will kill you immediately. Then there's medium threat. There's only guards in towns. So outside of towns, there's no guards. And then there's high threat, which is basically no guards anywhere. Everything goes. But like you had three different banks. So if you had something in low that you got as a drop in low threat and you wanted to move it over to high threat, you had to manually run that stuff over. And we had three GEs as well, but we later learned that that was a terrible idea because no, like if you have three Gs, you have three economies which you have to fill with items. And funnily enough, the high threat one wasn't filled with items. So in the end, we changed that to be like one GE, but you were levied tax on your GE trades depending on what security you were in. So you could actually like make an awful lot of money just buying things in the low threat area and selling them in the high threat area because you kind of got that tax levy back.
Yeah. Because so
Um,
like the high threat had like no tax, right? If I remember correctly,
yeah,
and like lower had a tax, and yeah, so on and so forth.
yeah, and that was what was paying the guards wages, and we shouldn't be upset about tax.
So
They've got kids to feed.
something I actually quite liked, which I don't, I kind of feel like it could be interesting to have in RuneScape to an extent. I don't know, but I liked that the mini map was completely disabled in the
In the
wilderness
wildy,
in
yeah.
Darkscape. I actually thought that was a nifty way of making it a lot more dangerous.
Oh yeah,
Um,
so yeah, like I said, like we'd already made the world dangerous. You know what I mean? Like everything, all of the enemies were hyper aggressive. So that's why we turned off the minimap because in the world, seeing white dots on the minimap is your early warning system, right? And yeah, like I said, we massively brought in the fog so that it felt very, very close, very claustrophobic doing anything in the wildy. And you felt like at any point someone it's a bit like being in the wilderness back in the day. You felt that at any point a white dot was going to appear, and then 10 white dots were going to appear, and you'd be dead. And we wanted to like bring back that feeling, and like by bringing in everything really close and not giving you that early warning system, it kind of gave you that feeling when you were there.
so I'm gonna try and pick up the pace a little bit because I've just realised it's
Yeah,
getting a little late, and my apologies. So Darkscape, when it comes towards release, was a complete surprise, hidden update in essence. No one knew it was a complete unannounced update. I loved that concept personally. And then going towards the end of Darkscape, the combat system was significantly different to EOC.
yeah. So like the Darkscape community, and sorry RS3, but the Darkscape community was hands down my favorite community.
Why?
So so the way I can describe it is like when I'm talking to the RS3 community, like you guys are absolutely wonderful. But when I was talking to the Darkscape community, like it felt like I was just in a room with all of my colleagues, and we were spitballing to get design updates. Like I remember like a guy put a post up basically trashing the like objectively trashing the combat system, and like he literally drilled down to like these are the reasons why the combat system right now in Darkscape is bad. um and like every day I would have like a back and forth on the Reddit about like, okay, so how can we like improve this? Oh, what about if I do this? I'm like, oh no, mod pi, like that I don't reckon that's very, very good. Like, what about if we do this? And like there was this constant dialogue of back and forth. And if I came up with a stupid idea, they like they'd be like, oh, I don't think that would work because of this and this and this. Like, and there was nobody posting and going, oh, mod pi should be fired because he's a terrible game designer. It was like, oh no, I think this should be this way. And it was very constructive world, and that's ultimately why I was able to completely rewrite the combat system for them, because they were like, this is what we want, these are the things that are wrong, and so I'd attack them and they go, okay, this works, this doesn't, let's do this. And what we came out with was actually really, really good. They were like, strength does nothing, why is it even in the skill there? Because we were basically the legacy system, right? So I created a system where strength affected everything, and like your damage was actually a scalar of base times the strength. Um, like people are like, oh, I don't like I don't like the fact that I don't like the roll to hit system is like a rock paper scissors system. So I got rid of the combat triangle. And when we got rid of the combat triangle, I'm like, okay, so why do you want to wear these pieces of armor? And like we came up with these cool set effects, and we kind of said, you know what, now deciding on whether or not you're a mage, ranger, or a melee, it's not about this rock paper scissors system or like what is objectively best. It's there are very clear, concise gameplay differences between them. So like melee was this big tanky thing that did like thorns damage and was all about surviving and atrophying you down. Range was this very like vulnerable but high DPS class that relied on basically vampirism effects, to heal you. Like mage was all about control, so like your stuns and your binds lasted longer. Vuln scaled up to like 20%. And because we got rid of the combat triangle, you could actually mix and match. So you wanted to be a bit more tanky, you just incorporate some melee armor into you. So say like you went full ranger, but you're a bit too vulnerable, so you just put a little bit of melee in, so you wouldn't lifesteal as much, you wouldn't deal as much damage. But like it was yeah, like there was problems wrong with it. Like range in PVE was just overpowered as all hell, because you basically self-sustained, and the you didn't take enough background damage. Whereas when you're fighting against a player, like they're dealing an awful lot more damage to you. But like yeah, like what it was a very progressive time. And I had great back and forth during the ESE betas. Don't get me wrong. I still talk to an awful lot of the players that I spoke to during the ESE betas, but it felt like I was having a design brainstorm with 3,500 people, and everyone was just getting along and happy, and it was just awesome.
So, why? I know it's been. I know there's been a public post as to this. Why was Darkscape closed down?
Um, so we'd got to a point where we were like, okay, so we need to bring on a whole load of new players. Um, like the game itself, the game itself wasn't like making enough money to sustain itself. So you've very very simple business things. It's not about making a ton of money. It's about this is how much the game costs to make, and this is how much the game's making. Like if you remember the membership options, like all content was free to play. You didn't have to buy membership, and membership gave you a bigger bank and double XP rates because it was about PvP, not gaining XP, etc. Um, but the cost of making the game was up here, and the amount of money and it was making, and then we were losing. This bar was going down, and we were making efforts to bring it back, and um, like, and we weren't getting any new players because it's a cutthroat PvP game. So as your high level players go up, which is why I reckon seasonal Darkscape would work very well. But I think if we just released Darkscape, it would have the same fate because you get your hardcore PKers just like basically getting rid of all of your new players. And don't get me wrong, the hardcore community of Darkscape was very much like, okay, let's bring on the newbies and let's help them. Um, but it was just it needed an end, and like a reset for it to do well.
I would argue that Darkscape is kind of like it led to what we now know as Dead Man and Old School. I think it had inspiration off that, personally. I mean, I
So
could be
the two
completely
things
wrong.
were made. The two things were made in tandem, and actually, the
Okay.
idea for Deadman came before Darkscape. So I think I don't think it's actually fair to say that Darkscape was the predecessor to Deadman. In fact, if anything, it was the other way around. Old School was offering this hardcore PvP option, and Darkscape was doing that. Deadman was took a lot longer to make than Darkscape, but Darkscape had its teething problems, and Deadman went very well, and they're still running seasons to this date, I believe. So like taking the extra time helped.
So so that I mean, there's so much we can cover, but I just don't have all the time in the world, unfortunately. Right, let's go on to obviously quick note. You redid the Juriel Falador Massacre anniversary event, and I know for a fact you had a lot of fun with that one.
Oh, I love that.
That was a fun footnote as an update. I enjoyed that quite a lot. I want to get something very quickly. Hostilius, is that still gonna happen, or like what's the status of Hostilius? I guess is the question here.
Hostilius is very much a in my own time project. Um,
Gotcha.
it was a tap project. And even if I do make it myself, I still need to get an art team to work on it. I need to get a QA team to get on. I mean, I need all of that support. It was something I was making on tap when that time was allocated. So right now Hostilius is paused. I still got all the ideas for Hostilius in my head, for what I want Hostilius to be. So I'm not willing to kind of divulge in what I wanted to do because
Fair
I
enough.
might make it one day. But it's not on the horizon anymore. It was a very very strong concept, that went down incredibly well. But don't hold out for it.
So what was I gonna say? Pooey, my brain just completely crapped. Oh, ability. Do you think right now, combat wise? I mean, without presuming there may be new abilities or not, I do not know. Are there any cool abilities you'd like to see personally in RuneScape for combat?
I'd like to see Mage get thrown a bone.
Okay,
And everyone's like, "Oh, Mage is the OP one. Mage is the one to go for." But gameplay wise, if you don't taking four ticking out of the equation, because that was always I always wanted to replace four ticking, but I didn't want to take away something that made it interesting. Because if you take four ticking out of the way, Mage is boring. Like the rotations are boring. Like it's very kind of I press this now, this now, this now. Like when you fortic, that kind of messes with the meta and makes it a bit more interesting. Um, but like range now has like the bolts, which make it a bit more interesting. We tried to do puncture. That's not where it needs to be. But like range has these things that makes it interesting and does change your rotations and melee. Well, yeah, like I think mutated barge is probably the favorite ability that I've ever made. Like don't get me wrong, like I've made like a bunch of abilities that I really like. So I made all of the corruptions, I made onslaught, I made all of the like I've reworked more abilities than I can think. I made all of the melee abilities for ED2. Um, but like I think mutated barge is probably my favorite. Like the fact that the idea for mutated barge was I can't stay on my target forever, and we were giving melee all of these movement abilities, and it just wasn't working. Like bladed dive is absolutely awesome. Um, Shout out to Mod Tomb
Yep.
for like pushing us to make that. Um, oh, as an aside, when we made bladed dive and puncture, we also made a mage variant. Um, we designed this ability that like you'd turn it on and you can carry on doing abilities, but it was a you'd like spend 15% adrenaline, but what it did was it made your max hit and your min hit do this. So your damage range got
Ooh.
wider and wider, and it carried on going into the negatives. So you could heal the boss if you got
What?
RNG wrong,
Why didn't that
but
happen?
you could also hit really really strong. So the reason why that didn't happen is because crits are a thing, and we'd already started baking crit into things like Conk Blast, for instance, and like pushing. So like what's the current like top crit right now? It's above 20%. It's like 27 or something percent, isn't it? With like
Yeah,
fighting three
yeah.
plus Grimoire and
Fighting 3 level
yeah.
20. In
So
which
if
obviously
you've got
boosts this
this
one. Yeah.
window doing this, and then you can guarantee the max hit every X abilities, like
Oh,
it just
sounds
kind of broke.
so
So
good.
we ended up not releasing it. Um, but yeah, it was the ultimate troll ability, right? Because you'd either like smack the boss for a ridiculous amount of damage and like do an uber hit, um, or you could end up just healing it. You know what I mean? But like, yeah,
I'm just imagining like you. Oh my god,
but
just like
like,
using an omni power and it just does a massive heal instead of a massive hit. Oh wow.
yeah, but like the idea of mutated barge was we'd added all of this movement to it, but it wasn't working. So we instead focused on making melee this like insane burst. So if your target stays still and behaves, then yeah, like it's just going to be ridiculous, right? But that's not what happens. That's why melee wasn't picked up and why it wasn't used. Your boss moves around. They make you move. So like we're like okay, so I basically made it so that yeah, you could
Excuse me.
take the most OP things in melee, which is the channels, and turn that into a dot, so you could layer it with other channels, so that you get like the highest burst in the game. But you do it over this window, because that's the way melee works. You're kind of like on and off the boss. You're chasing it around. Um, so yeah,
I won't lie, I absolutely love that. I wish it was a thing. Wow, genuinely sounds incredible and quite fun, and quite obviously tragic if it heals, but quite hilarious if you do a massive
that's
hit.
that's generally where I go. Like whenever I design like I want to shake up the meta at the right point. You know what I mean? Like I want to, provide you guys with something new to play with, and that's why I want Mage to get something because, and why I didn't remove four ticking because when you break it down, Mage is because weapon switching is a thing, so spells aren't the unique thing anymore. Like four ticking allows you to utilize spells to do it, but like I feel like Mage needs something to make the gameplay more interesting because yeah, right now it's the go-to thing because it does a lot of damage and if you do four ticking it does a hell of a lot of damage, but it's just yeah. You know what I mean? It's just I don't enjoy Mage. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, Magic, asphyxiate, right? Go back to Sunny, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I just know what I'm doing whenever I'm doing it.
So I'm going to touch upon them very quickly because I'm going to try and, as I mentioned, try and speed things up a little bit because there's other things I want to get to. But Deathmatch and Bounty Hunter obviously update in 2016 towards the end of 2016.
Yeah,
Looking back on those updates, would you have done them any differently?
yeah, um, yeah. So like the idea was to give a way for PKing to be self-sustaining because right now it's a very punishing thing. Like, I as if your play style is a PKer, why should you go off and PVM for ages? So it was a way for if you're a good PK, you can get it yourself. But like it ultimately came down to like I put a lot of things in there to make it farmable. Like I was around during the EP days where you'd gain EP and get someone to kill you for money, so like 76King. Um, like, but ultimately, it came down to the fact that if you give players full control of that environment, um, then they're naturally going to min max the hell out of that, and the best way to min max that is to grab a bunch of accounts. If you don't want a PK, then um, you can basically just ransom the bounty hunter thing. Like it was one of these things that was great on paper, terrible execution. If it worked, it would have been awesome, but like I think if I had to say where I'd like PvP to go in RuneScape, not that I'm going to make it because I feel like my time for PvP in RuneScape is up, and I'm really enjoying making stuff for the PVM community. Like I said, I get a kick out of you know other people getting kick. Is yeah, it's like it's safe PvP, so it's like World Event 3, but like
Duel anywhere?
um Duel Anywhere. Yeah, see, I made that after Bounty Hunter.
Yep.
Um, and like something like I have actually I don't know if I ever showed you the prototype. I created what was effectively arenas. So you could queue to go in an arena and it instanced a part of the world, and you'd fight on that world. And then that was linked to the ELO system and matchmaking system that I made. So you could be like wood cutting, and then all of a sudden you get like you get match made, and you could go and do that. So like it makes PvP a lot more accessible. You get to PvP without the scariness. But also you fight in some really cool locations. I think I had you could fight on like runespan platforms. I instanced Nex's area to fight there sort of thing. And that was fun. But I think like for something to be rewarding in RuneScape, for it to be desirable, there has to be a reward. So you can't just ask people to PK for the sake of PKing. There's a small cohort of people that will do that, but there has to be a reward for doing it.
Right.
Um,
Oh, sorry, go on.
it and I think like I genuinely think in RS3, obviously not in old school, but I think in RS3 like the mentality of like PvP is this hardcore hyper death thing, and that is what PvP is in RuneScape. I just don't think that works anymore. It's a bit like how kind of people have made their camps and they're either EOC or they're old school. Like it's the same thing. Like the people who have stayed on EOC want a more modern approach. They want a more modern approach to design. So they want that short session accessible PvP. They don't want to have to worry about this hyper death. They just want to take the best armor and go in and have a lot of fun, and learn to become a better PKer along the way. But it would need a reward system. But again, like if you hand over to players all of the keys to that reward, then they're going to min max it. So like if you just released it as wrote, you would again find people who would queue up the matchmaking system, and then they would say, I'm going to make this really horrible for you if you don't. I'm just going to sit there and shield tank in Actio, unless you pay me 300 GP because you've got these kind of separate economies going on.
Alright, I'm going to ask you three big questions, and then I think we can kind of wrap up. These are pretty beefy ones, so I'm interested to see your responses to them. So, you've obviously been involved in boss development, boss design, so on and so forth. how do you balance a combat encounter when it comes to difficulty? So how do you find that middle ground between, yes, you want to make this a challenge for, our veteran, experienced PVMers versus, someone who wants to get into PVM but they may have a chance of doing it?
Um, there's lots of levers. It's not just damage. So it depends on what your goal for the boss is. Like you've got pieces like bits of content like Solak, who is your hyper end game, super punishing thing. But then you've got like God Wars 2 that was made to be accessible with very little mechanic. You basically need to think about, so what one thing that we have in boss design is what's known as kind of layers of complexity. And that's basically talking about how many things does the player have to keep track of or keep in their mind whilst they're killing the boss, right? So, like first of all, you've got like your entry level. This is something that Revolution thinks about, which is just your rotations and how you mess with them. Um, so something like just Kriara, for instance, right, has a low, very not many very many levels of complexity. So you literally can, if you know what you're doing, you can AFK it really, but you can stand in the thing and you can only think about your what you're doing. And then you've got like um a low level of complexity. So let the player, let's just assume that the player can or is either using Revo or has their rotations, has a comfortable rotations. They're not thinking about that anymore. And it's like the boss constantly has like one mechanic that the player always has to think about, and like is just asking questions of the player. And it doesn't really, it doesn't really get you to change your rotations based on things. It might be like a ball that falls on the floor and you're not, so don't stand in the fire, and that's like one layer of complexity. So that's how we create like a God Wars 2 boss. So those bosses only ever really throw one thing at you. Arguably stuff like Hellweir and Greg will throw like maybe two at certain points, but you don't have to keep track of an awful lot of things at once. So QBD is an example I specifically didn't say because depending on the phase, QBD
Mm.
has different layers of complexity. Phase 4 I'd say has like two layers of complexity. In the you've got like the time stop and also you've got the other things going along at once, but the early phases are a low level of complexity. Um, and then you've got stuff like Telos, which will then get you to do two complex things all at once. And then Solak is your hyper thing. So there's an unwritten rule in especially boss design and game design in that you should never ask a player to think about more than three things at once. So that Rahman will tell you that this is like a tenet that he held to when he was making Solak, in that like when at its hardest, um, Solak will never ever get you to think about more than three things at once. And
Yeah, actually, yeah.
that's discounting your rotations, right? Because a comfortable end game player will not have to think about that. It might get you to change your rotations. So like for the burst at the end of phase 1, you will switch to melee because that's the best burst,
So
etc.
in the
But
case of Solak, it's like final phase. You have to keep his health bar up while keeping the
yeah,
other health bar down. Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah.
now I think about it.
But
Interesting.
yeah, so that's kind of how we do it. So it's obviously there's damage and health and like gear checks, um, but it's and punishment in the case of Solak. But really, it's more about like the layers of complexity on the boss. Like Araxor's a great one that actually slowly scales this layers of complexity right to the end. Like phase 1, you just have to, can you count to four? Can you count to four and can you anti-freedom at the right times? Then you go into phase 2 and then you're doing the same thing again, but now there's another mechanic there. Phase 3, now you have those kind of two mechanics working for the path you didn't take, and then like phase 4 is kind of like, right, now you have to press, which now there's like a bouncing git that's gonna try and get like it kind of slowly builds up those layers of complexity, and like that's what kind of breeds the Jad hands, if you will. But also also, you know, that like the fun and the payoff when you do get it, because you kind of go through this moment of stress and then you finally get it and you're like, yes, and you get like the payoff. And you know, that's how we kind of scale the difficulty.
All right. If I was to ask you, where would you love to see EOC in the future? What would be the ideal for you?
I'd like to see EOC undergo like a similar transformative change to how Darkscape did, where it kind of asks itself hard questions about what is the value of things and deals with that, but also like to make the change of, okay, I'm just wearing this best gear because, and to say actually, you know, I'm wearing this gear because that's the gameplay style that I'm enjoying and what I want to play, and that's a very difficult balancing act. It's not something, you know, that can just happen overnight. But it's if you look at the design of our abilities over time, you can see that that's where I've kind of tried to push EOC in my time working on it, is to try and push in that direction where, you know, like you you kind of gravitate towards the kind of gameplay that works for you, and you do find that comfort zone and you find what you enjoy. So it's not like just levels of intensity, but you know what, like if you really enjoy range, just use range. Like if you like that like boring mage thing where, like, you know what, I know what things to press at the right time, use that, you know. But if you want a 4 tick, use that because that's what you enjoy, you know what I mean. I'd like to see EOC kind of
I,
undergo that
I
kind of
want to.
resolution.
Personally, I'd love to see more effects. Like I like stuff that can kind of change it up. Like someone's already mentioned it, but like having weapon effects on Hex Hunter or your Terrasaur Maul, stuff like that's nice.
Yeah,
It's
like
not just tier 92, tier 92. It's okay. I'm going against a mage boss.
stuff
I can use
stuff that
this and it's better.
asks like stuff that gets you to answer questions in the middle of the boss fight. I'm always a big fan of. That's why I brought back the criminal bolts. You know, like because
Oh, Backy bolts.
yeah, like that, like Ruby for what, like knowing the Ruby to Diamond switch over, and you know, like we're starting to see these weapons which are niche, but again they change the way you play when you use them, and that's, you know, like that's what what I'd like to see.
Cool. All right. And the final one, which actually takes us up towards the end anyway. So, as a quick heads up, I think just to bring players up to date, you correct me if I'm wrong on the engine team now. Is that correct?
Yeah, um I'm full time on the engine team now. However, I still can get some time to work on content, but it's like I'm for the most part I'm on the engine team now. I'm not really making I'm not part of the content creation teams. But I can help out if needed because I still have that skill set. Um, but like um there was a little while ago they suddenly realized that one of the most I am now, due to people leaving, I'm now one of the most knowledgeable engine devs we have in the company, and I'm sat in the content. Um, I'm sat with the content guys. So I love making content, and like I probably will still make content, and I'll probably fix a bunch of combat bugs that have, you know, one day I'll just wake up one morning and Super Saiyan Pi will appear, and I'll fix like 20 bugs in a week. Um, but like, yeah, for all intents and purposes now, I'm full time game engine, because we kind of need that expertise in the team right now.
Cool. And then I guess the best way to end it is if there's anything from I guess like if anyone ever wants to get into the industry or like anything in that regard, is there any advice you can give them in that sense?
Make games. Doesn't matter how rubbish it is, right? Because like my like if fundamentally if you want to get into games, it has to be a passion. Like you'd be an idiot to go into games if you weren't passionate about it. You get, like, as a programmer, you get paid less for than other jobs. You get more stress. Jaggers is actually very good at this, but typically you work more hours. You know, like, and all of that for less money. Like you'd be an idiot to go into the games
There's
industry and not love it.
there's a story I will say. I won't reveal the people involved, but in regards to what you just said about we Jagex don't like people overworking themselves. There is I'm not going to say that mod name, but there was a mod who stayed up very late, and his manager noticed that he was still doing submits at really silly times, and he basically told him, "If you, I'm literally going to force lock your dev account to get you to go home and make sure you look after yourself to make sure that we're looking out for you." So to that point, that's one
Jagex,
that stands out
like
to me immediately.
they look after me very well. Like quite often my other half needs my help at home, and they're just like, yeah, go work from home then. Um, but like if you want to get into the industry, just make games because the best way to get better at making games is to make horrific mistakes. And like if you've been following my time at Jagex, I've made a lot of horrific mistakes, but I've learned from all of them, and that's what's made me the developer I am today. But like I said it earlier on, like when I'm looking to hire someone who has made games in their own time on their CV is way more impressive than someone who has a degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you've gone, there's an awful lot of things that you go through when you make a game, and an awful lot of things that you learn that you don't know until you make games.
Um,
Um,
So I just want to jump in just before we end. Maz actually just jumped in the Twitch chat, and we have talked about your interview, but how terrible his dev training was. I presume you were taught by Maz. Is that correct?
yeah, I was. Yeah, yeah.
No way was it terrible then.
No, it wasn't.
I
No.
mean, like, come on, Maz. Let's come on now.
I
Yeah.
was. I was. I'm not gonna lie. I was a bit of a chavvy, gobby thing when I turned up. It wasn't. It wasn't all sunshines and rainbows, but that fortunately Maz and Anna helped me out
Well,
there, and
got it.
now I'm less of a goddess. I still am one. I still am one. Don't get me wrong, but I'm an
uh,
acceptable, respectful one.
no, that's fair. Um,
It was probably harder for Maz than it was for me, to be honest.
Honestly, we could talk about so much more stuff. And to be honest with you, John, I won't lie. I think sometime in the future we have to do another one of these and talk about even more stuff because this is barely scraping the surface, in my opinion, of so much more stuff that we could go through. But I mean, again, thank you for taking like this time to do this because I've had a blast hearing
Yeah,
stories and everything
I'm
else.
always happy to chat about RuneScape. I love it.
And
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's nice. I obviously we don't see you on streams much anymore, so it's also nice to have it from
No,
that
I'm just this
perspective.
kind of game engine gremlin now. You know, they don't let me out the basement until it's working.
So yeah, everyone I do give your gratitude to him for taking the time to do this, and as always, let me know if you have enjoyed these. Personally, I've had a blast, and the next one is next Saturday, and I'll be talking to Kyle, also known as Mod Ramen, about how he got into Jagex, how he got to QA, how he went from QA into content development, and how he made the steps towards creating AOD and Solak and other stuff. He'll probably be landing a K and other things along the way.
Yeah.
It's been a blast. I've had yeah, Saturday the 11th. I've had amazing fun doing this, John. So thank you so much, and as always, thank you everyone for watching. Have yourselves a
Thanks,
wonderful,
guys.
wonderful night,
Thanks for
and I'll see you
listening
around.
to my rambling.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks. Bye bye.